All right, shall we get seated and start the meeting again? Thank you, everyone, for allowing us a little bit extra time to have lunch. We had a spirited dialogue this morning that ran a little bit over, so apologize. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion about the Department of Transportation's management review engagement. And Ms. Bruce, we have a team here, and we're going to have a discussion about the communications plan and request approval of the implementation monthly progress report as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Boehne, and Commissioners. My name is Kelly Bruce, and I am with Strategic Business Services in ODOT. I am the project manager for the management review overall, and also with the strategic business plan. And in an effort to keep us moving forward, I will be very brief. I'm going to have Tom discuss specifically the task around the communications plan, and then I'll just give you a couple of quick highlights on the progress report for all of the items.
Thank you, Kelly. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Tom Fuller. I'm the Communications Manager for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I'm going to be very brief. But in terms of background, you'll recall seeing the McKinsey report that was done earlier this year. And in terms of talking about a communications plan, which is the deliverable that I'm speaking on today, I did think it important to put in a little bit of context, because in the McKinsey report, on page 28, it talks about communications at ODOT. And I wanted to point out, because I'm very proud of my team, that it says the performance of the communications function is the strongest of the 4 support functions analyzed within ODOT, and much stronger when compared to peer organizations. Interviews supported this finding and showed that ODOT's ability to engage the public is a real strength. So we have a value that we can use in our ODOT communications section, and we're putting that value to work in terms of what McKinsey did find in terms of areas for improvement, and that is in terms of engagement. And on page 55 of the report, it shows a chart where levels of engagement of stakeholders, it has green, yellow, and red. And in terms of transparency, across the board, it's yellows and reds. And so what we're talking about here is a way to improve public engagement. And this is mostly in terms of transparency with our ACTs, advisory committees, and public stakeholders. So we move from the McKinsey report to the actual DAS recommendations that followed that report, which directs us to create a communications plan under number 5. And it says ODOT in consultation with the OTC should develop a communications plan that articulates how ODOT will close the loop with external stakeholders regarding decision-making and project prioritization. It instructs us to build on our strong engagement efforts, outline how input is solicited, used, and how the resulting decisions are communicated back to stakeholders. Special emphasis should be given to low-income communities and communities of color, and this plan shall be delivered to you, the Commission, by December 1st. The desired outcome of this plan, which we're always trying to keep in mind, is increased transparency surrounding the prioritization of projects and stakeholder influence in agency decision-making. So then the third piece, which we presented to you in a very draft form, is the communications plan, which we call transparency in decision-making. We added a couple of pieces of context to this communication plan in light of things that have happened since the McKinsey report and the DAS recommendations. One of those is, of course, House Bill 2017. It provides us with a unique opportunity to show this increased level of transparency that we are committed to. We also added a new process for public engagement for the 21-24 Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP, so that we can show increased levels of both transparency, engagement, and accountability. So I'm not, of course, going to read the plan. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it. But we wanted to provide this early draft to you because we don't want to come on December 1st and say, well, Commission, isn't this great? Let's approve the plan. You say, you guys kind of missed the mark. So we wanted to come today and present to you, give you an opportunity to engage, provide feedback. We'll come back again, hopefully perhaps next month, and say, are we getting closer to what you need? And then hopefully in December, we'll all stand in a circle and sing Kumbaya, and we'll be happy with it. That's the goal. Okay, so to the plan. The overall goal of the plan, which we have on page 3, is to improve effectiveness by increasing the engagement with those affected by agency decisions around funding allocation, project prioritization, and policy decisions. We'll come back to that after I go over the strategies, because I want to get an understanding from you folks if this is what you envision. The strategies that we have outlined begin on page 4 of the plan, and they are, number 1, to increase transparency, accessibility, and openness of the decisions that you make as a commission. These are the 3 values that we felt would address the idea of transparency and openness in the overall plan. We think we've made some significant strides in that area, including the live streaming of this very commission meeting here today, a website that very clearly presents relevant data of the decision-making process that you are undertaking, and also an online form that allows citizens to provide direct feedback to the commission. The second strategy is to provide meaningful opportunities for input in major agency decisions. So this includes when we are funding and choosing projects, including the STIP, Connect Oregon, and other things. Then thirdly, to communicate agency recommendations and decisions to affected stakeholders in the public. This is that part of, we heard you, this is what we've done in response to you. And so we're trying to really increase and supplement our stakeholder input processes and communication methods to make sure that we hear, we respond, and then we let people know what those responses were, what were those changes. And then we're increasing communication and opportunities for input from our advisory committees and metropolitan planning organizations about funding and project selection decisions. The McKinsey report found that especially the Mpos felt very disengaged from the process. And so we're working on ways to help them feel more included, even if they don't actually have a seat at the table according to the way that the governance is set up. Next, we are striving to improve public engagement in project development. Public engagement is an essential ingredient in making sure that what the commission decides and informs ODOT to do is actually what is most effective out in the public. We do that by engaging, by having conversation. Partly we are doing that through a complete revamping of our public engagement efforts as an agency. We have created a public engagement coordinator. We are creating a community of interest around public engagement in the agency, which includes a lot of research that we've done on the state of public engagement and creation of a toolkit that can be given to this community of interest, and they can help each other to improve the state of public engagement all across the agency. We have very uneven public engagement. Some regions do it very well, are very well staffed. Others have no staff at all. And my communications section folks, my PIOs, end up having to do a lot of that public engagement effort. So how can we improve that, make it more even across the agency? We also want to improve the availability of project information, and this is including some provisions in House Bill 2017 that will allow us to provide more of a dashboard for folks to understand how projects are doing. A brand new website that we just launched this summer that tells people where projects are and communicates about those projects in a way that people actually speak, rather than how, forgive me, Commissioner Brown, and how engineers speak, which isn't always readily understandable. Or attorneys. My father was an attorney, so I understand how that goes. Anyway, and then finally, to develop tools to engage low-income communities and communities of color. And we have had some really good, robust discussions and are seeking out ways that we can not only engage in the project and development, but also in the decision-making processes themselves and the groups that make those decisions. How can we reach out to disadvantaged groups, communities of color, to help them feel more engaged in that process? So then we have, at this point in this draft, 4 measurements, including surveys of customers, measuring social media engagement and sentiment of the things that we're doing, some metrics from website views, and an after-action review of the success of this effort. So the future, after this plan is done, it's not going to just sit on a dusty shelf. My plan is actually to take this and make it the foundation for an agency communications plan that can take these values and kind of inculcate them throughout the organization. As appendices to this, we have the 21-24 STIP tactical communication plan, which is also alongside with these, with the values that are in the DAS recommendations. So my ask of you today is really, are we going in the right direction overall? Are the goals and strategies going to where we should be to fulfill your needs? And then what would you like us to bring back to you in November?
Please.
In spite of Commissioner Simpson's request that I shut up, I'm just gonna have to say a couple things. So, no, look, I think it's great, and I guess my question is do you think it aligns between the transparency requirements in 2017 and what was outlined in the McKinsey report? Is there anything that we're not covering? I mean, do you feel like we've kind of gotten our arms around the bulk of what they've requested or suggested?
Yes, Commissioner O'Halloran, I believe that we have gone both with the spirit and the letter of what was required of us in House Bill 2017. I feel very comfortable with that.
I think it's great. Thank you.
So Tom, I think this is great also, despite being an engineer. I can read English sometimes. One thing I would ask you to think about is this worth having the Mpos and ACTs take a look at and say, does it meet their needs? Because it's one thing to meet our needs. We should know what's going on, but really that transparency goes beyond just us. So it might be worth it just to ask, or ask around this during our meeting the next couple of days, take a look at it and give you some feedback, because it's their needs. It's our public constituents that we need to make sure that we're reaching them. And I saw the big red box, and you've seen it too. It's how do we get that message out there? And I hate the word transparency. We all have different ways of looking at that, but really it's open, honest communication that everybody understands. So that might be worth something just to see if it's meeting their needs too.
Commissioner Brown, that is an excellent suggestion, and we'll absolutely do that. That's really good feedback. Thank you. Especially for an engineer.
We'll have Senator Beyer here. I'm sure, but I mean, it's really kind of a great opportunity to say, hey, look, we took it seriously. Here's what we're doing. I think it's good.
Yeah, I would concur with the comments that have already been made that it's looking like it's on the right path. I would just have one suggestion around the communications component of this, and it's something that's been running my brain lately, that, you know, the perception of the department is really heavily predicated on its history of being the highway department. And I would make a concerted effort to convey the messaging more broad in terms of the context that the department doesn't just build highways, but it builds communities. And as we're looking at the shifts that are taking place in the country around urban dense development and mega metropolitan regions, the highway system does play a significant role in that. However, what comes as a result of these highways around these different networks is the community. And so I think that's an important story to tell, and a message to convey it to the broader stakeholders and folks that are invested in the prosperity of various different communities, that is a role that ODOT plays in their own prosperity and livability.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpson. I couldn't agree with you more. It's why I did sort of a back of the napkin thing a while ago, and wanted to make sure that my people talked about businesses, not budgets, and communities, not concrete. That sort of idea, that it's really about the people and the community they live in and their economic viability that's important, and transportation supports that, rather than just being about laying down concrete highways.
I think the challenge will be, the one thing that I've heard a lot, and I agree with my colleagues' comments, is that feedback loop after we've made decisions or after we've taken their input. And so I think that piece, making sure, and I like the idea of going to our stakeholders and making sure that that will work for them as well, how we communicate back and explaining the reasoning and how their comments either influenced or were taken into account in terms of decision-making, I think is critical. So I love seeing that in there, and I think that'll be challenging to get that clear back, but I look forward to how that works out.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Do we have other comments or, okay, so we do have a monthly report that we need to, please, Kelly, go right ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Beatty. So just a couple of quick highlights. It's attachment 2 to the letter for this agenda item is our monthly progress report. We are continuing to work on the KPMs and keeping an eye out for, of course, alignment with the strategic business plan as that's being developed, as there will be performance measures associated with that. Fleet is working on developing plans for underutilized fleet as a result of some work with DAS and some analysis that was done there. Facilities has brought on their consultant, and that consultant has begun work, so their work is in progress. Procurement, we are working with DAS. They have a research team that's begun and will be conducting interviews to look at statewide issues as well as issues within our own procurement office. And our strategic business planning process is in full swing. We've had kicked off all of the working groups. There's 4 of them. They've met twice. They'll meet a 3rd time before the end of the month. We also have a visioning group that has also met twice. And Commissioner Simpson, to your theme of prosperity and community, that theme is coming up throughout the strategic business planning conversations as well, so I think you'll be pleased to see that. We look forward to bringing a really full, robust presentation next month on our progress. So with that, I'd like to just ask the commission to accept the monthly progress report for October.
Do we have questions or comments? Please.
I move we accept the monthly progress report for October.
Excellent. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank
Great
you.
work. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, a couple courses of actions here. There are questions that need to be asked and answered specific to the consent calendar item number 14 and 15. So what I'd like to do, Madam Chair, is without any concerns, questions, or conflicts specific to consent calendar items 1 through 13, I would ask the commission to approve en bloc consent calendar items 1 through 13.
I have one question, Madam Chair. For item number 3, and I've looked at the attachment, is that an open-ended approval financially? So I think it's if I understand correctly, it is, we're authorizing, we're giving authority for property purchase.
That's correct.
And so I guess, is it open-ended? Do we know what the number is on that, or are we just giving you a blank check?
It's not, it's open-ended specific to the project's needs here. So each of the pieces of property that we are seeking have some connection or tie back to a project footprint that we want to move forward on. So it is specific.
Okay, and then I guess one other comment, and this maybe relates back to some of our transparency. It appears that on consent agreements in general, we are approving a lot of additional funding for projects that have already been approved. So it's perpetual cost overrun. And I realize that is part of the process, but what I want to get at is, from a bidding standpoint, do we typically award to lowest qualified bidder? And then if we have other bidders that maybe are a higher number, but they're actually giving a truer appraisal, so that they might be losing out on the initial bid, someone comes in as low bidder, but then on every single bid, we're doing a cost overrun that's relatively significant. And I just want to know, what percentage of the projects are we going over on? And it seems like a lot of them. And from a bidding process standpoint, are we really being equitable to those who are coming in and giving a much more honest appraisal of the cost versus someone who's potentially lowballing, knowing that we're going to come back and pay and write the check for a cost overrun?
I think, Madam Chair, Commissioner O'Halloran, a lot of questions in there. The reality is, we only bring those projects that that we need to amend in terms of cost overrun. So you're not seeing the universe of projects that we actually deliver on budget or under budget. So remember, you're just seeing a small portion. I will get you the specific percentages in terms of, if you look at the whole of the universe of projects that we move forward. What do we bring to you? Because that's all you're seeing. You're not seeing the other significant portion. The specific to low bid, again, we have checks across as a project is developed, as estimates and the various components of what makes up the estimate. We have checks and balances that, again, saying, this is our estimate, this is what we believe it's cost. We can hold that up, and you will have a conversation on one of the consent calendar items we're going to bring forth in terms of engineering estimate versus when we first scope a project. There is an evolution and a scrutiny that informs that. We do low bid. There's no question about it. Then we affirm that low bid. The question I think that we can bring to you in a little more detail is the disparity between the bids. Let's say we have 4 vendors or contractors bidding. What's the differential? If there's wide swings, that's problematic. That would demand that we come back in and saying, why does contractor X bid $5 and the next 4 contractors that bid are bidding 15? That raises a flag. If everybody's within a $5 and $6 million range, okay, we're pretty much shooting at the target here because then it's in alignment with the disciplines that we've brought forth, and we believe the project will cost X. What we can do, I think, Commissioner, to answer that question is really break it down for you and bring forth a presentation that gives you a full picture of the universe of projects, what we are delivering on time or under budget. Of that full universe, the percentage that we come to you, here's what you're doing. And then we can actually break down and have a conversation about how bids are arrived at, both from an agency perspective and then how the private sector engages in a bidding process as well. And it may be a discussion that involves not only us, but our private sector partners as they. Now, again, there's some proprietary information here, and they're not going to show all the cards, so to speak. But to walk you through the discipline on both sides of the table, I think that's probably a legitimate conversation. But I do understand your question because everything that comes at you is an increase. We don't come out and say, you know what, we saved $5 on this project, because we'd be doing that over and over again. So there's somewhat of a distortion, I think, just because of what we have to bring to you. I think we can inform that question on many different fronts, and if you allow me to work with my folks, I'll bring back a comprehensive presentation that I think will answer your questions.
Yeah, and I'm not asking as a percentage of the projects, and hopefully most are on budget, but it just seems like if there is a pattern of cost overrun, even if it's the higher end projects, are we really being unfair to those who weren't the lowest bidder? Because the project cost isn't really legitimately the lowest bid. So anyway, that's the only point I made.
Understood.
And just I want to piggyback on Commissioner O'Halloran's point there, because I believe I had addressed this before, and really I think the information that's needed here for us is a simple report that would outline, maybe if it's a quarterly or monthly or annually, whatever it may be, list of projects that just have what the internal budget was and then what the actual net cost was, whether it was a red because it was an overrun or it was it was in the black because it was under, you know, and then that would be our net number at the end of that period that we would look at it from a bottom line standpoint. I think that would be very important information to know, not only just for us to understand, but also just in terms of how we're measuring the performance of our staff that are budgeting these projects.
I think, Commissioner Simpson, I appreciate that insight, and again, we will, I'll engage my folks and we'll figure out a construct, bring that back to you.
Just back to Commissioner O'Halloran's first question about land acquisition. I should know the answer to this, but do we, are those numbers that we pay for land acquisition based on appraisals?
Yes,
Always,
yes.
yeah.
Please.
Madam Chair, move approval of consent items 1 through 13.
Excellent. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Let's take.
Madam Chair, now I think it's
13.
appropriate to engage the questions surrounding consent calendar item 14 and 15, and I would ask the appropriate ODOT professionals to come forth. And Madam Chair, if you'd like, let's just jump into consent calendar 14 and ask the questions.
Okay, so for those that are here, it is a STIP amendment of the 1821 STIP to increase funding on Oregon 140 Antelope Creek to Odgard Road project by $776,844. It's in Region 4. Please.
So perhaps I could just jump in, because I think unless there's others that have questions, I had a couple of questions on item 14. Really for me, and Bob, we talked a little bit, coming from a $15 million challenge you had earlier this morning to basically what I consider a $600,000 quantity error. It's a process check for me. And as I mentioned to you before, it's really our, and Commissioner Lohman will jump on me either now or later about how much due diligence do we do on project scoping. Yes, if the quantities had been correct, we'd still be paying this amount of money, but we would have known about it ahead of time. So I guess for me, it's the transparency, my unfavorite word, of how we do business. And so it's truly a process check. This was awarded in May. It's coming to us now in November. I'm sure that was a validity time period to validate those numbers and when they came up. And then my final question on this one, which I didn't like the alternative. Are you really giving me an alternative to go from 7 inches to 5 inches for a pavement lift? Because I don't think that would give you the road you were asking for. So those are the three things, Madam Chair, that I was coming up with item 14.
Chair Boehne, Commissioner Brown, and Commissioners, would have been happy if this is all I was here to speak about today. And to Commissioner O'Halloran's point earlier, it's not unusual that we have quantity differences between when we do preliminary engineering on a project to when we develop final quantities for contract documents to when we get out and actually get a contractor on the project. The consent item 14 that talks about our OR 140 Antelope Creek to Osgard Road project has a couple of elements in there that led to our request today for an increase in $767,000. The small one is, the small element is the experience that we had after we got a contractor on the job and realized that we had some poor subsurface conditions that we did not anticipate. So we did some deep base asphalt correction in these areas where we did not expect or have reason to expect a need to do that, but felt while we were there and uncovered them, it was the right thing to do. That was a fairly small increase and probably wouldn't be here today if that's all it was. The larger one and fairly unique to the work that we do, I think, was just a quantity blow, pure and simple. We run fast and hard on some of these projects. Not that that's any kind of excuse on any of them, but in this case, we had a quantity error that we never did pick up through the preliminary engineering work that we did up through final plans that didn't come to light until after we had a contractor on board and we were under construction. And so the bulk of the increase today is a result of that quantity error. About $595,000 of it is attributed to that. That's in essence where we're at. Would we have had an option to redesign the pavement to keep the project on track. Yes, if there was a need for us to scale back the design, but we felt that the right thing to do was to keep the integrity of the pavement design and address the quantity error with the request for this increase.
So Bob, I guess if it really isn't an option, and it shouldn't be an option to scale back from 7 inches to 5 inches, please don't put that in a staff report that that's what you would do. That's another piece of the process for me. And I won't get into the staff reporting, and I write them too, so let's get real options on the table. Thank you.
And not being an engineer, I may take you up on one of those options that I don't know won't work. So I like that as well. I mean, I'm sure it would work, but not for the longevity and the integrity of the project that we would want. So thank you. Other comments? If not, I would welcome a motion of the will of the commission.
Move approval of item 13 on the consent, or 14, excuse me, 14 on the consent agenda.
Okay, do we have further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, let's go on to item number 15, and this is requesting another STIP amendment to add a total of $2,136,958 to construction phase of I-84 Farley Slide project. Please.
I
So-
can go through background, or you can ask me questions,
Well,
however you want to approach it.
Let me just phase,
good.
give you my questions, and
Good.
I talked a little bit to Ryan Wincheimer on the phone and a
Good.
couple others. So the question here is really accountability and, again, due diligence on project work.
Right.
This is not an area unfamiliar to ODOT. We've worked up in there several years, at least according to your staff report. So when we look at those costs for this year, and we're looking at a 40% increase on these costs, I guess because we have worked there and we know the level of impact that it takes to work in that area, again, I feel like we blew it. I feel like we are not doing due diligence to get our cost estimating correct. And yet I realize that these costs with 6 or 7 bidders came in all around their same numbers, so their numbers are fair.
Right, right.
But that doesn't mean our number, I mean, essentially, we became low bidder on a project by a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And so we're paying this extra, not that we wouldn't have anyway, and I don't like
Right.
that as an answer, but really because we didn't put the front-end work. And again, it's a $2 million question, not 15. Sorry, Bob. This will be the last time I'll say that, though.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think, again, I just want us as an agency to look at what we're doing and provide solid engineering upfront and be accountable to the people that are paying the bills. So, thanks.
So a couple of comments. Paul Mather, Highway Division Administrator, and with me is Tova Peltz from Region 1, who's very familiar with the project and can talk about some of the project details. Obviously, yes, we do a lot of work in the gorge, but the particular work that this project represents is not work that we do very often in the gorge. This is slide remediation work that is extensive work that on the interstate, in a national scenic area next to a railroad, is fairly unique work. And we struggled internally with how to put enough risk into this project with all the risks that are going, that we know about in the project. We typically, in our projects, we have costs that we know and experience in bids from other similar projects that help us hone in our estimating with what's going on in the market. In this case, we don't have a lot of rich data to build upon, to build that estimate on. So when we got the bids, they were 35%, the low bid was 35% over our estimate. The questions we ask ourselves, is this still a project that's viable and a good value at that price? And looking through where it is on the interstate, where it is on our seismic lifeline routes, we answered those questions. Yes, we went back through and looked at our quantities of where where we missed those, and Tova can talk more about what they found in that area. But we concluded that we could take savings from another project. So in essence, there is also a savings of a project that is coming forward with you today to reallocate some savings on another project to this project. This is what ultimately where our estimate is and what the market will bear. The market will bear dictates how much we're going to pay for the project. We have to ask ourselves those questions of the value of the project and the importance of the project at that price. We ask ourselves those questions and why we made the recommendation that we have for the project.
My name is Tova Peltz. I'm the Region 1 Geo-Environmental Manager. And Commissioner Brown, I was on the phone as well with Ryan the other day. I would add that when we put together the cost estimate, it was a consultant put together the cost estimate, and then the region reviewed it, and as well as OPL, and we all agreed from an agency engineering standpoint that was consistent with the information that we had. However, once the bids came in and we dug into the bids and looked, we all got back together and looked at where the costs were coming in high. We realized that we rarely do landslide projects. Well, this is an unusual project in the gorge in the National Scenic Area with really limited access issues, and those pieces add to the risk associated with the project for a contractor. And as we dug into the higher costs, the higher bids from the contractor, we saw that we really think it's associated with access and the type of equipment that was necessary to do the work, and the contractor's concerns about what that will take. We have a tight schedule and a really tightly dictated schedule due to traffic constraints on I-84, which we were aware of, but the implications on the actual access for micropile construction, we're going to have a difficult time quantifying that risk for a contractor. We reached out to our agency senior engineering geologist, Kermoni. We talked to him a lot. His comment about the cost and where the bids came in was that's what it costs to build, to repair a landslide on an interstate. He wasn't surprised at that final cost from the low bidder. He also indicated that it's in the range of what we would spend to fix landslides on our lifeline routes and what we will be spending to fix landslides on our lifeline routes in the future. So from his standpoint, it was it's good value. And again, he reiterated that we're going to struggle as an agency with quantifying the risks associated with fixing landslides on interstate highways, particularly in the gorge. So I think that we do struggle, I think, with identifying how much money to put into risk associated with landslide repairs. Typically we do landslide repairs on an emergency basis, not as part of the STIP, and certainly certainly that's true within the National Scenic Area as well. So it's something we need to work on. It's good to have some new data, and it's certainly something we need to work on in the future.
Commissioner Brown, to your point, I think we do need to get better at estimating. I think whether we miss the estimate high or low, there's impacts we have to our program, and neither one of those are good. Our ability to estimate is key to our project delivery and success. And so I don't think it's just us becoming more conservative and then overshooting our estimates, because those have impacts as well. But we're finding those numbers based on the data we do have, and we can get from past projects and get closer to what is going on in the market, reading the market forces. You've heard me say this before, but it's something we're going to continue to struggle with, and that projects we're going to talk about on a topic next for the STIP, we're going to be starting to do estimates for those projects, and they're going to be in the STIP for 2024, and trying to know what the economic conditions are going to be in 2024 for these projects is always going to be a challenge for us. And we'll put contingencies, we'll put risk factors in, but again, we don't want to be too high or too low. We want to be as close as we can for impacts to our program.
Thanks, Paul. That's what I was looking for.
Thanks.
I understand, and I appreciated the phone call. You were getting to the phone call too, Tova, is about saying, but we could have. I want us to do better. That's my whole purpose for bringing you guys up to the table, is I want us as an agency to strive to do better and to have better estimating tools and to hold ourselves accountable. Oh, gee, the consultant made a bad mistake, and I get that too. The consultant did that to us, but then we go back to our specialty. Well, of course it was going to be higher. Well, then somewhere we're missing asking that question. I just want us to ask better questions, have better estimates, and not be high and not be low. And you can't be perfect. But if we can be in a better ballpark from an accountability standpoint, it will do better for all of us. So I sincerely appreciate that. And Paul, also want to thank you for the work that was done on Highway 66 with slide improvements. It was a different kind of slide, but with that slump on Highway 66, I've had several phone calls and people saying, ODOT was amazing, got in, got out, time frames, and did a great job, so thank you.
Good, yeah, Region 3 staff, Frank Reed and his folks did a marvelous job with that. That was also a project that we did struggle with in that we didn't have any bidders when we first went out. We had to go back out, struggled again to attract bidders to that project because of the uniquenesses of that work.
I agree that we want to have our estimates as accurate as we reasonably can. But I guess I want to, from my perspective, estimates have several purposes, but one of them, I think, is to assure that we're spending the public's money wisely. But it's the bid process that ultimately determines that, and the engineer's estimate is a check on that, on the bid process. It's not the fundamental guarantor that we're getting the best possible price. So I don't want to over-rev on this. It is important, but it's not of paramount importance, I would argue.
I'll tell you later what she said. Okay, did you? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I would welcome a motion with what the will of the commission is on this particular project, or these changes, rather.
Thank you for the explanation. Move approval of item 15.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And Director Garrett, this brings up a good point. The management review touched on some of the things that we just talked about, both Commissioner O'Halloran's comments in terms of total project costs, as well as what we were just talking about as estimating. I wonder if there isn't maybe a scope of work here for when we look at auditing, and not something, you know, fully loaded, but deep dive into the details, but something that gives us a feel for, we only see a small sample of the changes and project changes, as you mentioned. And part of that might give us a hesitation. A lot of what we see is the ADA requirements, so those are going to be project changes. There are a lot of moving parts. This may be something that we could talk with our new audit function and parse through that total project cost and the estimating and really see where we are so that we know what our baseline is today. Thoughts on that?
No, Madam Chair, I think that's well said. You know, over the course of the last several commission meetings, this issue continues to come up, which suggests to me it's an area of risk or concern. That is certainly an area that we would point the auditors to say, hey, help us better understand what the risks are, what the protocols we have in place, and to Commissioner Brown's point, how can we get better, right? If indeed there is a deficit, and that's exactly what that business tool is for. So I think it's legitimate. We can go internal, we can ask for outside eyes as well, but again, we have professionals that I think could look at this and say, you know what, this is an area that needs to be explored, and let us tailor that, right? We don't want open field running, but let us tailor that, and I think we have issues in terms of cost estimates, the bidding process, even going back to the scoping process, right? That's just the life cycle of the project, from the vision to the project development, eventually to construction. Now, those are big worlds, so to speak, but where do we target? Where's the most vulnerable approach to that. I think a legitimate conversation with our auditors to see where's the greatest risk for the agency. More than legitimate, we'll pursue it.
Excellent. Please.
On that point, I'm just trying to figure out if I were a contractor, why I wouldn't just go in with a low bid every time, just knowing that we're going to approve it. And what would happen if we didn't approve these funding overruns? Would we have projects that were 80% done? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out we kind of don't have a real choice on whether we approve these things if a project's going to get completed.
Right, and for me, I want to know, what are we talking about in terms of percentage where that's actually occurring?
Yeah.
And so that we
No,
have an
no, I-
understanding of the true.
The scope,
Yeah.
I get it, but it's
So,
still,
but it's a
it's still
great question.
multiple millions of dollars and just see it. So Paul, you're shaking your head, so.
Oh, Paul's,
Well,
hello.
Well, I guess I'll certainly have Paul jump into this, but I would submit to you that if you're looking at the private sector, it's pretty competitive. And if people start to game the system, it's going to be known very quickly, and I think there'll be some self-policing by the associated general contractors themselves. And I just don't think it's good practice, and I think a contractor that would be in that game would not last very long in the industry.
Just a couple of things, make sure we're talking about the right thing. So when you approve an amount that goes into the STIP, that's an amount that authorizes us to move forward with that project. The engineer's estimate comes very late, and we use that, as Commissioner Lohman talked about, to validate whether we got a good bid or not. If a contractor does as you suggest and low bids and comes in, they're well under then the amount that you, well under the amount that you approved as a STIP, there's no coming back to you for increases. We still have that amount already approved in the STIP. We go forward and manage the contract, and we come forward with you as savings then to reallocate those savings for another project, to deal with the cost overruns as we did in the last agenda item, so forth. So I think as you're suggesting, a gaming of the system from a contractor, it's a different amount that you approve in the STIP than what the bid amount is a different number that we manage to.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that there is gaming of the system. I'm just saying that if that were the pattern, it would seem like it could be open for that. And I realize that there is integrity. There's a small pool of people here, so I don't want to over-rev on what the point I'm trying to make about the fact that we're constantly approving the overrun. So I'm not trying to read too much into it, Paul, and I'm not suggesting that there's anything nefarious taking place. So just to clarify.
And I think Commissioner Harlan's point is completely valid. I think where the confusion here is assuring that because everybody's competing with one another, that everybody has a margin, everybody has a fee that they have built in to that budget. So if somebody cuts theirs down, knowing that their competitor's price is not going to make it drastically different, but it'll make it lower, to know that they can make it up with change orders is something we should consider. I would even consider that if on that list, just for Commissioner O'Halloran's sake, that we have the contractor names of those projects for that report that I was discussing or requesting earlier.
Great. Excellent. Do we have anything else for the good of the order for this part of the day? I think this is for our formal meeting. Director, go ahead.
I think that's right, Madam Chair. So we've concluded the formal meeting. We need about 10, 15 minutes for Jackie and the professionals to rearrange the rooms. 10 minutes. That's all we need, 10 minutes.
Okay, welcome. I would like to welcome everyone to our annual workshop. I first wanted to start with a thank you, because it was a year ago where we sat in this room together and we talked about the what if and the what might be, and about the hope for a package. Many of you seated around this table hosted in your own communities the visioning panel. We had the Joint Transportation and Modernization Group through the legislature that went around the state as well. We also asked you to use your voices and engage your legislators and to engage your community so that we could move forward with funding that we desperately needed in the state of Oregon. We talked about things like reducing congestion. We talked about things like bike ped, transit, seismic resiliency. And we sit here today with a wonderful opportunity in front of us. So I want to start with a thank you and also an open invitation as well, because now we have a great responsibility among ourselves to fulfill the responsibilities and the responsibility that's been bestowed to us through House Bill 2017. So with that, I welcome everyone, and we have a presentation, so I will turn it over to the team.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, for the record, I'm Travis Brower, ODOT's Assistant Director. I'll walk you through what we're going to do with this discussion today. Paul Mather and Jerry Bohart are also here with me. I am going to start out giving the introduction, providing a little bit of background information, the easy part, and then I'll make Paul walk through the scenarios and the highway funding proposals, and then Jerry will cover the non-highway program and the next steps and tee up the conversation amongst all of our advisory committee chairs. What we would like to do is give just a brief presentation that culminates with a couple of questions that we want to frame up so that all of our advisory folks can then respond to those and get that conversation started, and have probably about 3 or 4 minutes of discussion for each of them, and then end with the commission providing feedback based on what you've heard and what you'd like to direct us with the next round as we move toward bringing you a final scenario in November. I'm going to start with just a little bit of financial background about the STIP. One of the questions we got was about how we estimate federal funding. You'll recall at the very beginning of this process, the Commission validated continuing our traditional assumption about federal funding, which is that we use whatever federal funding has been authorized by Congress, but and this is a big but, when there is an absence of an authorization by Congress for any period of time, we assume a reduction in funding, federal funding by about 10%. And then any money that comes in above and beyond that, generally it's a small amount, and we then put the direction from the Commission is to put that into fix-it projects that we can rapidly get off the ground. In the case of when the FAST Act passed, you may recall, we came back to you for a full reopening of the STIP because it was a significant increase in funding. The question that we've gotten from some stakeholders is why we make this assumption. Why are you so conservative about the STIP? And the answer is because it actually mirrors reality of what we've seen in recent years. I put together this chart based on what we've seen in terms of federal aid funding that comes to us for the STIP over a number of years. And you can see that 2018 is actually the first year in which our federal highway funding will exceed the amount we received at our previous peak in 2010. For the years in between, we saw flat or declining or just slight increases. In 2010, if the Commission had assumed a slight increase of 1.4% per year in federal funding, we would have been about $200 million underwater in the 2012 to 2015 STIP that you allocated funding for that year. And the similar situation would have occurred if you had assumed that increase in 2015 through 2018. So we have come to the conclusion, and the Commission has validated this, that it is more painful to cut projects from the STIP, and we'd rather have that flexibility to add projects should federal funding not fall off. It's a moderate and prudent course of business, and we think it is a good way of going about this. One note about what's in the STIP and what's out. The STIP includes all of our federal highway funding, including the federal highway funding that is flexed to public transportation. It also includes the portion of the state highway fund that goes to capital projects. That includes the bicycle and pedestrian piece, the 1% for bike ped, the new Safe Routes to School program. What it doesn't include is basic agency operations for the most part, maintenance, the local portion of the state highway fund, state funding for public transportation, or Connect Oregon. There are a number of these categories of things that aren't in the State Highway Fund that we wanted to provide you a little bit of context, and I apologize you can't read those numbers on this chart. But the local portion of the State Highway Fund is not included. One of the reasons for the recommendation we make on the funding going to local governments under this STIP is that local governments will see about a 50% increase in their State Highway Fund apportionments under the HB 2017 legislation that just passed. Similarly, what we've seen in recent years is that funding for MPOs has grown fairly substantially. This was a question the Commission asked back in August to see what that funding has done. Since 2009, funding for MPOs has grown by 66%. The funding, this is federal aid, highway funding directly allocated to MPOs under the Transportation Alternatives Program and the Surface Transportation Program. As a whole, for everybody else in the state, the similar time frame, funding has increased by 16%. So that's just a little bit of context for that. Yes, sir. And I should note, this is for the 3 large MPOs that receive direct federal funding. All other MPOs receive funding through our working agreement with cities and counties. Similarly, public transportation funding has increased significantly as a result of HB 2017 with the new Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund providing a very significant infusion in funding. Now, this is only a small portion of total public transportation funding, and it's not to say that the public transportation sector's needs will be met by this new funding out of HB 2017, but it does give you some context. When we get later into the non-highway funding, you'll see that we're holding public transportation funding flat. We're not recommending an increase there. This is one of the reasons for the funding that's outside the STIP is providing a significant increase in public transportation funding. The Commission has provided a framework for funding in this STIP. We have broken up the categories from that have been in past STIPs to provide a little bit more transparency and to walk the Commission through those so that you could provide your feedback. We did this over time over the last several months. The 6 categories are Fix-It, which is the category of projects, the largest single category in most STIPs that provides funding for preserving pavement and bridges and replacing culverts and doing traffic signals and things like that. The Enhanced Highway Program is one that we've split off from a general category of enhance. This is to widen or otherwise improve highways, improve traffic flow, reduce congestion, build new interchanges, et cetera. Safety programs are those that reduce injuries and fatalities on Oregon's highway system. Non-highway funding, this is the dedicated programs that are specifically directed toward non-highway infrastructure, including bicycle and pedestrian, public transportation, and transportation options. This is not the comprehensive amount of funding that's available for non-highway because there are a lot of other programs, like some of the local programs and even some of our Fix-It programs that include non-highway elements, but this is the specific dedicated funding that can only go to those non-highway programs. There's also a category of local programs. This is not the state highway fund dollars. This is generally the federal dollars that come through Oregon that we share either by direction from federal law or by agreement with local governments. And then there's a category we call other functions. Typically, we used to not include this in the STIP, but for transparency purposes, we thought it would be wise to do that. That includes things like workforce development grants that have been directed by the legislature, our planning and data collection functions within TDD, within Jerry's shop, as well as administrative programs, the indirect cost allocation that we set aside from federal dollars to pay some of our indirect costs. So that's the very basic background stuff. And now I'll turn it over to Paul to walk through the scenarios.
Thank you, Travis. Paul Mather, Highway Division Administrator. I'm just going to walk you through, I think, what we've been kind of building on or promising over the last several months as we've led you through kind of the build-up to today and for your consideration and direction on these scenarios. So here's Travis's categories that he just walked you through and the amounts of money that are allocated for each one in our scenario 1. And I'm gonna give you a chart here in a second that's got scenario 1, 2, and 3 on it, but just to kind of walk you through our thinking. As I think Commissioner Lohman suggested at our last meeting, we've shown on here not just the federal funds, but also what House Bill 2017 contributes to each one of those. Jerry's going to talk later about the non-highway piece, the local program, other functions there on the right. Really what I'm going to talk about is the Fix-It, the Enhance, and somewhat the safety dollar amounts. And this slide really kind of illustrates what I talked about. Really, it's either already designated in the different categories or it's a topic Jerry's going to talk about later. But these really the point of this in different scenarios I'm going to give to you is really that the toggle between fix it and enhance, and that kind of fundamental question of how much do we spend on taking care of what we have versus enhancing or growing what we have. And so the colored charts boxes there represent the dollar amounts in scenario one. The shaded or dark are really the ones you can't touch. Those are ones either set by the legislature, set federally, or Jerry's going to cover in her presentation. So relative to highway, when we talk about the fix it enhance, those are the funds that we're talking about. So here's the three scenarios. Again, toggling just that fix it and enhance. Again, the colored charts on here are the amount of federal funds that we're talking about. The gray or darker shades give you a fuller context of what the 2017 either fix it or enhance kind of does to those program areas. When we built scenario one is built on keeping the enhanced program at the same funding level we have in the STIP that you just approved last July. And made reductions in fix-it then to match the amount of overall funding that we have. Scenario two is just really the opposite of that, where we keep the fix-it amount at the amount we currently have in our STIP, and then the balance goes to enhance. And then just to show you what it would look like if everything went to fix-it, what scenario three is. So scenario one and two really kind of give you a bookend of kind of toggling between those amounts relative to the STIP that was approved in July. So I think an important point, and I've made this point I think a couple of times as I've been up here, but relative to House Bill 2017 and the fix-it dollar amounts, the legislature obviously put a sizable amount of money into the fix-it program. They were concerned about the condition of our bridges and our roadways, and their assumption was that we would keep the funding level at our current level of federal funding towards the amount of money that we have going towards fix-it. And so, for example, in these scenarios, if you went with scenario one and lowered that amount, you would be undercutting the direction of the legislature in their House Bill 2017. And so to give you just a quick reminder of that, these are the charts I think I showed you last month, just quickly on bridges. Here's our bridge conditions. The investment strategy there is the one in yellow. That's the one that you approved about a year ago. So that's kind of our desired state, so to speak. The green is House Bill 2017 with scenario two, or the current level of funding with fix-it. And then red would be our status quo without House Bill 2017. Same thing with pavements. What happens to our pavement conditions kind of looking forward. So that's just a reminder from last month, as well as just a reminder of how House Bill 2017 was constructed and some of the key assumptions the legislature made when they built that piece of legislation. Our recommendation from the staff scenario is that scenario two, that we would keep the fix-it funding level at the same level that was assumed when House Bill 2017 was constructed. We would use the enhanced money as leverage or opportunity for acts to add features to fix-it projects that were enhanced in nature. We would distribute those funds to each region, and the acts would have the ability to work with those. Another scenario or another recommendation that we would have, just I think to help the discussion and get your reaction to today, was utilization of those safety dollars that came to us in House Bill 2017. These are the $10 million on the state side that came to state highway funds for safety features on the roadway. Our proposal here would be to add those to the leverage funds with enhance, and again, allow the area commissions and the regions to add, in this case, safety features to projects as a leverage opportunity for those projects. I will give you a piece of background on this. When we talked about this $10 million with the legislature, our testimony was testimony that said we would use these consistent with our arts program. That was a data-driven process, and we would follow that same process to essentially generate kind of standalone projects. We would have to go, if there was interest in this, we'd have to go back, I think, and close that loop with the legislature and specifically with the joint committee about how we intend to use these funds. The statute itself doesn't preclude us from doing this way, but just to be transparent with them in the shift that we would make here from using a data-driven process to an act-driven process to leverage funds, we'd have to go back and close that loop. But that's an opportunity. If you combine the enhanced fund from the previous slide and the safety funds, it gets the leverage funds up to approximately the same amount of leverage funds the ACTS had in the last step to add features to projects. And so that's part of our motivation to look for ways to kind of get that amount of money back to ACTS to look for ways to leverage different features to some of the fix-it projects that are out there. So I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jerry Bohart. I'm the Transportation Development Division Administrator, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the non-highway funding. So for the Commission, I think this slide probably looks familiar from our August presentation, where we really talked about what currently existed. So for instance, in the public transportation, this is some federal highway funds, again, distributed directly for public transportation, elderly and disabled primarily. In the case of the State Highway Fund, the 1% that is set aside are for bicycle and pedestrian and then safe routes to school. In this case, a good portion of this is safe routes to school because you're heading into that part of House Bill 2017 that jumps safe routes to school up to $15 million a year. So it probably is a little bit over $60 million that you would see going to bicycle and pedestrian. And then the $51 million, the non-highway discretionary, you'll see a recommendation coming forward from that. But those are funds set aside for non-highway purposes, specifically both at the state and federal level, such as our transportation alternative funds. But you have some discretion in how you want to allocate those funds. So this is really the recommendation that we have around the $51 million. So the first sort of continuing the conversation that Paul just had around leverage, in the 15-18 we had actually just $6 million identified for active transportation leverage, and that was the opportunity for the regions as they were working on fix-it projects to see if there were a bicycle, pedestrian, transit needs that they might want to be thinking about with regards to the fix-it. What we heard from the regions was that it was such a successful program and the needs were so great that it was one area that we thought should be increased. So you see this identified as 21 million. In the case of the off-system bicycle, if you think about House Bill 2017, the 1%, all of that is really limited to what is on our right-of-way. And obviously, we have some needs for bicycle pedestrian outside of our right-of-way, so we're looking at perhaps $6 million here. And it would be, again, using the prioritization that we have in our bicycle and pedestrian program as we think about some of our regional needs. That's where the likely would go forward. Safe routes to school education, you might actually recall from, I think, some of the budget discussions actually, is that we've identified in Mr. Costales' budget 1.5 million going to safe routes to school education. So really getting to those action plans that our schools and school districts do. I think probably heard through the discussion around House Bill 2017, a lot of interest in increasing the education component. There really wasn't that opportunity because of the types of funds that were in House Bill 2017, but there are opportunities at the federal level to identify some funds. So in this case, we're actually recommending, in a sense, doubling it because it was at 1.5 million, bringing it up to 3 million. And the same for transportation options. It hasn't been too long since, as a commission, you approved our statewide transportation options plan, and really a need to continue to move that forward. Also, transportation options, and you might hear Jeff speak about this a little bit, but they do a lot of safe routes to school education as well. They do sort of that outreach and the marketing of that versus the actual plan. And then finally, recognizing that there's a continuing need for more funding for our ADA ramps, curb ramps, to continue to implement our transition plan required under federal highways. And this, would be above and beyond what would be required through the pavement program that Paul talked about, but just sort of the recognition that that's additional work that we needed to do there. So that's the recommendation of the $51 million. So just to sort of summarize, because I think, you know, one of the things that I know I've heard through the presentations that we've been making to you, a real interest in making sure that our area commissions on transportation are still actively involved in the STIP process. And so we think that there's lots of opportunities when we think about leveraging our Fix-It program. So whether it's active transportation, right, so bicycle, pedestrian, transit needs, whether it's the safety discussion or the enhanced discussion, which you heard Paul reference, there's really opportunities to really think about what we're trying to accomplish with the transportation system there. So that's sort of where we are with the non-highway. So just a reminder as we think about the steps, we're looking for your direction today, Commission, as well as the input that we're going to get from our committee members and our ACTs and our modal committees, as well as our Mpos. We would anticipate, based on the direction that we get from all of you, that we'll bring forward a proposed scenario in November, public comment as part of that, and then really looking to you to gavel down in December with the final program allocation scenario. But as I say that, it's just an important reminder, that's only sort of step one, a really important step one to the STIP, but you see there's a whole lot of work that continues to happen before you actually would gavel down in 2020, 2+ years from now, with regards to the 21-24 STIP. So you see a lot of work happening relative to the 150% list, the scoping that needs to happen, the draft that you would be releasing, and obviously the public review that happens as part of that. So just sort of a reminder that this is one of the first decisions that you make, but it won't be the only decision that you make as you go through this. So these are the questions that I think we've certainly asked our ACTs to think about, working with our region staff for them to think about. So what we're really hoping in this discussion is that we'd hear from the advisory committee and then get some direction from the commission. But I think before we go there, I would offer up if anybody has any clarifying questions perhaps that they want. We'll try to answer those and then turn it over for a discussion, if that makes sense to you, Chair.
Do we have any questions? It's a quiet group. All right. So shall we start in? Yeah. Let's make sure that we don't end up falling asleep after. Oh, look at that. Okay, all right. Whose eyes are shut? Okay, so going through, would it work best if we just start here with on this side and go around in terms of answering the questions? Some have come with prepared comments or just how this is meant to be a dialogue. It feels very formal. It looks formal, but it's meant to be an opportunity to share with the commission, help us understand the challenges and the perspective from your own areas. So Judge Thompson, do you want to kick us off? Hello, sir.
How are you today?
Excellent, nice to see you.
I'm Gary Thompson, Sherman County Judge, Chair of the Lower John Day Act, Region 4, right? I'm glad the opportunity to speak in front of the whole group. The Region 4 split up, so I don't know how we're going to work this, but I'll go ahead with some of my questions. We were supposed to prioritize how we would like to spend the dollars and how the money would be spent, and primarily it's maintaining and repairing roadways, bridges, and trails. Region 4 encompasses Highway 97, which is the main escape route in case of tsunami or a large earthquake down I-5. It's very important that we maintain 97. It's not the only north-south road other than I-5 that goes directly in from Canada to Mexico. So we've got upgrade all of the bridges primarily along Highway 97 to earthquake standard. I believe some of them are being done as we speak. We need to expand our broadband capabilities down Highway 97 so that the broadband is available for the truckers and emergency services for the full length in case of the earthquake or tsunami, or both. Also, along Highway 97, we have a shortage of truck parking. We're having a safety issue down 97 where the trucks are just pulling off to the shoulder of the road in any wide spot in the road and parking because of the new rules and regulations that the feds have got on the trucking industry. They can only run so many hours. With the new semis that they have 15 minutes to pull off or the motor is, before the engine is shut down on some of the new computerized trucks. So they don't have a lot of time to, if they get delayed because of construction or delayed because of an accident, sometimes they don't have much time to stretch to get to a rest area. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the semis pulled off onto the sides of the roads. And also, we need to establish a long-term regional transit system, which also feeds into the emergency services, also having a transit system, so we can get the people that are coming from the Willamette Valley on down towards Bend instead of parking them in our county. Is there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Judge Thompson. And please do speak into the mic. We are picking this up, and so how are we doing on the recording?
We're doing good. The mics are really sensitive, so just notice you might just be blasting, and if you have too many mics on.
Right, we did learn earlier today that if we have a number of mics on, then we end up with that sound that no one wants to hear, so. And the person next to you just might kick you right in the shins, so. All right, please.
Okay, my name's Steve McClure. I'm Union County Commissioner, Chair of NEACT in Northeast Oregon. First of all, I need to say that us in Northeast Oregon were absolutely delighted to see a transportation package pass. And I say that because we lost safe routes to school. In a lot of the counties in my part of the state, that was a big piece of their transportation funding. You take Union County, we got nearly 600,000. When we went back to the old 25% of the Forest Service, it went down to 60,000. And in reality, we were looking at a situation where we were going to really have to make magnificent cuts to make this thing work over the long haul. With the passage of the transportation bill, 2017, we're not going to have to do that. Now, we're going to have some lean years. It's not going to make us fat. We're not going to be able to fix everybody's problems, but we are going to survive at a reasonable level. So when I talk about this bill, that's the framework I'm talking about it from. Now, I look at your series of questions, and being from Northeast Oregon, you know, fix-it's important. We don't have a lot of demand for new roads and so on and so forth. We haven't changed out there. You know, we're a lot of area with lots of miles, and maintaining those roads is important. But I think more important from my standpoint, and probably for most of us in Eastern Oregon, is the job the legislature did and what the intent of the legislature was. So I think it's very important as the Transportation Commission and ODOT go forward, they keep that in mind. They need to honor what that intent was. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that you can't change it, but if you do change it, I would suggest you do it judiciously with the understanding of the people that gave you the money, okay? And that would be my recommendation. The other thing that I'm very pleased with to hear today is the willingness to keep the acts engaged in these processes. You know, I think when this new bill came out, those of us in the act were saying, well, what's our role in this thing? You know, the big bill came out and it named the Rose Quarter and this, and you're going to fund this, and your immediate reaction is, okay, what's left for us? But the way this thing is being structured, I see a structure that is going to keep the acts engaged. And when I mean engaged, if you go to a meeting and they talk about stop signs, or you go to a meeting and decide how money is going to be spent, I'll guarantee you which one is going to be the most heavily attended. And we need to keep that in mind, that if the acts are going to be engaged, they have to be engaged in a meaningful way. And the language I'm seeing here today, or the proposals I'm seeing here today, I think reflect that. So if you want me to answer the questions, my answers are going to be, hey, do it the way the legislature told you to do it and keep the acts involved. I mean, I'm not going to get any more complicated than that. You guys have spent a lot of time on slicing and dicing, and I understand that. That's your expertise. But I don't intend to get into that today. Again, a year later, I think we were all surprised that we're sitting here with what we have. At least I am. And not only am I surprised, I am very pleased because, you know, Union County will be able to take care of itself. The thing about Union County is winters. We had the worst winter we've had in years last year. We have wind gusts of 80 miles an hour at our airport, okay? That's what we deal with. And we spend a lot of money in snow removal in some winters. And in some winters, we're, you know, effectively we shut down. For us to continue to manage, we have to take care of that winter section, or we don't function as a community. And it takes a lot of money, and we were talking snow policy yesterday morning, and our public works director says our number one goal in Union County is snow removal. We have to be. You know, if we have to forego maintenance of roads, we do. So we're very encouraged about the passage of the bill, and I will state for the record, Union County did a public resolution supporting that bill, okay? I talked to Cliff Benz, he said that was one of 10 that he got from the entire state. So we understood how important it was to us, and I think our community understood. We did a good job of explaining it to them what the alternatives were, and we stood in the middle of the road with a group of people, and they looked at us and said, go find more money. I mean, we were charged with going to find more money. So again, I'm pleased. I'm pleased at the direction that the commission and ODOT are taking, and that's my comments. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I will just underscore again that we are here with the prevailing of the package because of that statewide committed effort toward coming together to talk about the challenges and to also talk about the need. And so thank you from all corners that we are here today. The piece about the acts and the role of the acts, I think that I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner, because we do want to make sure that we are making good use of your time. And so my hope is that you do remain engaged, and that if there are ways in which you see that we could elevate that or strengthen that, is something that we would want to know as well.
The secret is just have money at the table that we know we can spend.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sid Lycan, Lane Area Commission on Transportation, and serve on the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Also co-chair of our association's transportation committee as well. Before I get started, I just want to point out that our vice chair is here today in the audience, and that's Mayor Joe Henry of Florence. And I bring that up because hopefully by the end of this year, I will retire from this position, and Mayor Henry, our vice chair, will then assume this position as chair. So he's here today too, and I just want to say thank you for him being here. A couple comments, and first of all, I just want to echo Commissioner McClure's comment on we're very, very grateful about a transportation package. And I was very fortunate as my state senator is Lee Byer, And and Lee and I have been friends for nearly 25 years. And so it was great knowing that my state senator was, as co-chair of the committee, was working so diligently and also getting his time the way I did, which sometimes was kind of amazing I got his time at all. So I would like to echo that because it's very, very key. As many know, Lane County traditionally has been the highest receiver of U.S. Forest Service funds out of any county, really, not only in the state of Oregon, but in the United States. And we're dedicated road funds. And those numbers, and when you just go back to secure rural schools, those numbers were somewhere between $20 and $25 million annually coming to our road funds from U.S. Forest Service. Now it's based on harvest. It did increase a little bit this last year. We went from $600,000 to $900,000. $20 million, $900,000. So this package is really almost a saving grace because we have been making cut after cut after cut after cut within Public Works. And now with some dollars in place in our road fund, it's going to be very, very helpful. And this is just Lane County, not including what's going to be the helpfulness within our cities. On the questions that you proposed, and I will say, when we looked at the questions at first, it's pretty hard to look at them and say, okay, we prioritize allocation. Well, we don't know what the allocation is yet. And so, but what I want to echo, though, is making sure the acts stay engaged because we really understand locally what it means for our area and what our priorities are. And so when we can work with our local office, our local ODOT office, working all the way up and working with the commission, it's really going to be very, very helpful moving forward. On the enhancement of the split, so Lane County, for 2 years in a row, we don't have the 16 numbers yet, but we're in a position that we hate to be in. More fatalities on roads than any county in the state of Oregon. And in 2015, that number was 57. And out of that 57, more than 50% were on the rural side, rural Lane County. So a lot of things went into that. We have enough information to suggest there's a distracted driving issue, speeds, and so there was a lot of pieces that went into this. So obviously, fix it, and that safety side is going to be so key for Lane Area Commission on Transportation, and we're very strong on that. On enhancement, we have one major corridor enhancement project in our area, and that's that's Beltline Highway, Delta Beltline. And while it was there in the first cut, at the end of the day, it was removed, and for obvious reasons, it's a high dollar amount. I think the total estimate is about $300 million for that entire project. So it's a big project. So, but on that fix it, it's going to be key. And our hope is we won't be number one in that area. We'd like to be number one in something else. And so number one in fatalities, if we can get off there and hand it off to another county, we're more than happy to. Something Jerry mentioned, and I was really pleased that you mentioned this, and this is the issue when it comes to the multimodal. And you're talking about, especially in the bike ped. So Lane County is an interesting county. 75% or so of the population lives in what we call the Eugene-Springfield metro area, while in a county roughly the size of the state of Connecticut. So, but yet, we have a huge recreational bicycle industry. We have folks that like to engage with the outdoors. And so on the piece, and here's some things we have written down, in order for rural communities to become more multimodal like urban communities, there is a need to develop more bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, but limiting state funding to projects within the right-of-way disadvantages rural communities. So I'm glad you brought that up, because there needs to be flexibility, especially in the rural side. So if folks are coming into the second largest airport in the state, and they want to maybe take a look at what's going on, they want to actively, whether it's bike, ped, whatever the case may be, things have to be a little bit different than what they are, say, in the urban core. Eugene-Springfield, when it comes to bike ped, it's a machine. They have it down pretty well. When it comes to that rural area of Lane County, that's a whole different story. So the flexibility piece is going to be very, very key, I think, moving forward. And as far as your other question, so I think I kind of answered the enhance, and I'm only going to speak to Lane County. Enhance Highway, though, and I bring this up on how important the Rose Quarter is to us because it's on the I-5 corridor. And I go back to the conversation I had, and many people have had with Alan Ford when he was at the time president of Rosebrook Forest Products, and now he's, of course, chairman of the board. But when he tells us that 7 out of 10 of his trucks cross I-5 into Washington, that's significant. And that's one company. That's one company with a significant fleet. And so the enhancement, so that's why I was actually very supportive of the Rose Quarter, because it's such an economic engine for that entire I-5 corridor of the state of Oregon. And Paul, of course, I know we'll talk about the 205, so I don't need to go there. But as far as the relationship is concerned, we're hoping that the acts will continue to have a significant role as priorities come, and as each of our members come with different ideas, different thoughts, that whatever our priority is, that the commission, ODOT, the ODOT staff will take seriously and understand this will be very, very important for Lane County. And it may not score perfectly on somebody's formula, but if it's important for the county and making sure that things progress in a positive way, I would hope that you would take that seriously from the perspective of local government. That's what I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we will just interrupt and ask questions when necessary, so please, just keep going, please.
Feel free to interrupt. Doug Hunt, Lincoln County Commissioner, and I'm also Chair of the Cascade West Act. And our, excuse me, we're Area 4, Region 2. Gonna try some water. And it's a 3-county area, Lincoln County, Benton County, Lynn County. We are sandwiched between I-5 and Highway 101, and we have that great connector, Highway 20, between the two, and I think the commission has heard quite a bit about Highway 20, so I won't bring up Pioneer Mountain, Eddyville at this particular time. But thank you, it is done, and it's a nice highway, so come and travel it. As our Board of Commissioners considered the transportation package and got our Public Works Director involved, he made the point that with the passage of this package, the road funds will now at least be able to be maintained, and the road conditions within the county will at least be able to be maintained. It doesn't mean they're going to get better, but it means they're not going to deteriorate. And without the transportation package, we were looking at a annual drain of reserves, and the expectation that in roughly 7 to 10 years, we would be out of reserves, in which case the roads would, our roads would experience significant deterioration. And I think we all realize that it's a lot more cost effective to maintain the roads before they are seriously deteriorated. When we look at the prioritization, I know our act feels very strongly that fix-it and safety are certainly should be the priorities. As I think I've indicated in my comments already, there are limited dollars to maintain what we've got, and so the need to have extensive enhanced packages or programs seems a bit contrary to the idea that we need to do as much as we can to maintain our existing system and fix it. A couple of thoughts that I've heard were mentioned in the previous presentation. I think the use of the leverage funds is an excellent tool. I think that provides flexibility to the acts. I'm an economist, and I think any time that you can combine projects or see an opportunity to maybe fill a gap or do projects that probably maybe aren't sequenced exactly right but can use leverage funds to complete those projects in a more cost-efficient basis, I think is a tremendous, makes a tremendous amount of sense, and certainly was pleased to see that there'll be additional funds under that program. Also, think the ACTS data, I think, again, being an economist, I'm data-driven. I think the arts system programs is a good one. I was pleased to hear that there's certainly some balances to how does that program fit into addressing safety. And again, we feel that fix-it and safety are the two priorities. So I think some combination there, and again, you talk about the flexibility and the value of ACTS. I think there's an area where we can certainly be effective. I think it's important to point out that the transportation package includes a couple of important projects, certainly the intermodal transfer facility. There's $25 million that's been set aside for a project in Willamette Valley. Certainly the international paper site in Millersburg, I think, is a potential opportunity there. And there's some money that was set aside for the Highway 99E in the Halsey area. But also want to talk about Highway 101. It clearly is the artery of the economic engine along the coast. And I think as you look into the future and realize that someday there will be a Cascadia subduction event, when that event occurs, the ability to move goods and to address the needs of our citizens along the entire coast, certainly Highway 101 will play a critical part in that effort. And I've mentioned before the commission that I think there's some opportunities to look at Goal 18 and Highway 101 and see if there aren't some ways that we can improve that highway. Certainly some of the seismic projects for some of the bridges would seem to fit that criteria. But again, I think Highway 101 is critically important, and I think the use of, or addressing Goal 18 and maybe modern technology offers some alternatives there. I guess the last point that I would make is that, again, being a rural county, we've worked hard to provide a transit system that actually connects with Tillamook County to the north, and we're pleased that we now have a link to Florence in Lane County. Certainly that transit system is in place, but I think if money can be used to make it more user-friendly. It's one thing to say you can get on a bus in Tillamook and go through Lincoln City and get to Corvallis. It's another to say it might take you 2 days to do it. So if there's some ways that those systems can be more user-friendly, offer a better sequence of rides, I think that's certainly an area, but we're pleased to see money in that part of the funding package. So those are some of my thoughts. Again, certainly excited to see the package passed and look forward to being a part of the process as we move forward.
Thank you. My name is Len Finley. I'm the acting co-chair for the Southeast Oregon Commission on Transportation in Region 5. I'll put a little different perspective on it, and that's because I'm from a city. And I will start agreeing with Commissioner McClure pretty quick. But from a city's perspective, we are doing the dance of joy after the passage of House Bill 2017. This gives us an opportunity, and there are 56 cities in Region 5. Every city in the SEAC, except one, will benefit from the special cities allotment. That is a program that we believe will now give us the ability to start a preservation program for our streets. Without that, especially after last year when we spent 1,000% of our snow budget last year, we dipped into reserve significantly. This package will now allow us to begin a preservation program, which is absolutely exciting and something we need to do. I believe in Region 5, we have a unique situation, and that's between the Southeast Commission and the Northeast Commission, we enjoy an excellent relationship. When we work together on our lists, we work together in common. And in fact, in the last project, the Northeast chair, vice chair, was recommending projects in the Southeast area because of the need. So we enjoy a great relationship, and I believe we really think the ability for the acts to act is critical. The more authority, the more that's given to us, the more we will produce. And I think, you know, Commissioner McClure stated it very clearly, is the intent of the transportation package is very clear. And, you know, we happen to have a legislator in that represents most of us that's pretty active. We love him a lot. He calls me at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in a different time zone, so I know he's working at it long and hard. But the more opportunity that we have to direct our local stuff is critical for us. And I think we do it right, we do it well, and we're very happy about that. As far as the split, I mean, we work a lot of our stuff. I mean, we have few resources. The enhanced program helps us a lot. And we combine them and work together on those efforts very well. I think the split between the two, it's hard to, you know, you could call it lots of different directions, but the structure of the transportation package is very clear, and we support hanging in with that. We think as far as the rest of the package, we look forward to the development of the committees to sort out the special cities allotment. I can speak to that clearly. We have opportunities now. We have some growth opportunities going on in the Southeast and Malheur County specifically, where we believe that some of the increases in the transit will help us in workforce movement because we have some areas there. Obviously, the transload facility is huge for us. We think that's an incredible benefit that we're working through at the time. The increases in the county's allocation, we have had a lot of discussion about having a part of that reserved for economic development opportunities as they arise, which we think is critical as we have these opportunities happen to us, that we can address them immediately, you know, to supplement the immediate opportunity fund or the special public works fund. We'll have some flexibility to address those because things are looking a little bit better after a bleak winter. I mean, we suffered some incredible circumstances, but we see a path forward, and I don't believe it's a train in this regard. So we're pretty excited about that. So I guess I would be happy to answer any questions, but thank you.
My name's Wayne Fording. I'm the Central Oregon Act Chair and Jefferson County Commissioner. And we spoke with our act, and our priorities aren't going to change from what we wrote to when we first started lobbying for this transportation package. Maintenance is key to pretty much everybody in the Central Oregon Act. That is the number one thing. And of course, we were working real hard on long-term funding for our regional transit. In Central Oregon, we have East Cascades Transit, and it takes care of all three counties. It's kind of a unique scenario. It's not a district by any means. It's just funded through state and federal dollars and county dollars, whatever the small counties can put in, and Deschutes County and the city of Bend, everybody puts into this regional program. So we're glad to see that. We did work hard on a 190, getting that through the legislature, and we thank everybody for that. The third thing is, as far as prioritizing is ensuring readiness for economic development. The IOF funds, any way we could lump some of these funds to help those things. I know for us in Jefferson County, the IOF funds were very critical for helping Daimler locate up in our industrial park, and that's been just a great thing for our county. And I think it's critical that we have some flexibility there for all counties to be ready for economic opportunities when they come knocking. And one thing that's been on the Central Oregon COACT priority list for a long time is expanding access to rail service in Central Oregon. You know, right now, the rail lines come through there, but there's so many different tunnels and different things that limit the rail service in Central Oregon. It makes it real tough. And rather than becoming truck dependent, we would like to see some way to expand access to rail. And again, to jump on with what Judge Thompson said, the whole 97th corridor has those truck parking issues. And we see that in Madras and Jefferson County, as well as all the way up the 97 corridor. You know, one thing I was glad to see in the proposal or the slideshow today was the flexibility among the enhance and the safety dollars to team up on some of these fix-it projects. You know, that's always, we've kind of seen things get siloed, and that's one thing that I think our act spoke about, but it was addressed before we even got a chance to testify. I think that's the direction we'd like to see things go as far as utilizing those funds to work together. And, you know, like the economist said here, it makes sense to, you know, do those safety projects when you're right there and you got a contractor on board, and we can get a lot more bang for our buck by doing that, you know. And, you know, as far as answering the rest of these questions, I think a lot of the group is hitting it. You know, of course, one thing I guess we should touch on for the 97 corridor is the seismic resilience piece along that there. I know that's been talked about a lot, and, you know, it's a good chance now to do a few more of those improvements in case of the big event. So that's what I have.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm Henry Heimiller, the Chair of the Columbia County Commission and also the Chair of the Northwest Area Commission on Transportation, which covers Columbia, Clatsop, Tillamook, and rural Washington County. I'd just like to do a little shout out to the ODOT folks today. I have to say Bob sat up here this morning with his hat in his hand and talked about the $17 million overpass to nowhere, or whatever you guys want to call it. But I want to say that, you know, and there's a few other cost overrun issues we've heard about, but I want to think that for the project or two here that have maybe fallen a little short, and the work that you folks obviously want to make sure that it takes place, that doesn't happen again. I want to say that the ODOT folks, by and large, do a darn good job for our area, and I'm sure throughout the state. And I would suggest that there's probably a whole lot more projects that come in on time and under budget than there is that see big old concrete pieces sink into the ground for no known reason. So I just wanted to give them a kudos. You guys do good work, and I'm not trying to blow up smoke up anybody's skirt. I'm not looking for a job, but the bottom line is, for the most part, for those folks that are watching this or listening in or whatever, I guess everybody should know that it's a big job to do the work that you all do and that you direct them all to do, and the advice and input that you get from all of us out and around the state. It's like herding cats, there's no doubt about that, but it's not a small undertaking, and I think for the most part you ought to really pat yourselves on the back because you do good work. Now on to the real point of the issue, and that's to pass on the messaging from my act. One of the things we saw in the presentation a little while ago was a discussion about ADA funds and that sizable amount of dollars that were in there. I have to say, and this comes from a gentleman, and if you want to call me that spent the bulk of his life as a paramedic, and to this day am very passionate about ADA issues. The vast majority of folks in our act really don't want to see a whole lot of more funds spent that direction. Now, I think that part of that is the fact that we all drive to the meetings in a pickup truck, and we don't have to deal with those issues. It's interesting. I can say this for Senator Johnson in our area. For some of you may know that she was in a real bad car wreck a few years ago, and she often says, "I really didn't know the need until I knew the need." And so I have to remind folks that we have to keep our minds open to those needs, both for ADA issues and how we get those folks on public transit. For me, I'm not going to rehash a lot of this because I think we're all reading from the same playbook, but it is going to be very important for us to have the flexibility in these funds so that we can do a number of different things. One of the things that we've discovered in South Columbia County is, and most of you probably know about the OMIC project down there, it came to town pretty fast, so, you know, collaboration amongst Boeing and all the higher education folks and that kind of thing. But we don't have any funds to build a road into the project, and so the legislature has set aside funds. Those dollars will trickle through, but we don't have any way of getting our hands on money for those kinds of things quickly. And so I think we need to look, as we talk about economic development, when we're talking transportation dollars, is how do we have a pot of money that could be available statewide for appropriate projects when you get some of these large organizations that when they decide to build in Harney County, Oregon, they may want to start right away and not have to go through some process that's going to take forever and ever to do it. We just need to kind of think about that a little bit. When it comes to the fix it and enhance, overwhelmingly in our act, fix it rose to the highest point of the list. However, I do have to remember back about a year ago, and I think it may have even been in this room as we sat around this table, and there shortly after, I was talking to a gentleman that had come to this meeting, and he happened to be a farmer out of Klamath County. And I cannot remember his name. I wish I could, but I just can't. And he and I talked for a few minutes after outside, and I said, well, what's the biggest transportation issue that you have in Klamath County? And he said, getting my product through Portland. And, and it really didn't resonate to me as a rural county commissioner how, it does for Columbia County. We're close to Portland. We see those impacts all the time. But to have a agriculturist from Klamath County say that getting through Portland and across that I-5 bridge with his products is his number one issue in life really makes me realize that enhance it. We can't lose track of that. And clearly the legislation in House Bill 2017 has addressed that to some degree, but I think that it's important for us all to educate each other as to how important that is. I think it goes without saying that safety is a piece of everything that we do, whether it's enhancing, whether it's fixing, whether it's bike ped, whether it's transit, whatever it is, we're all wanting to make sure that all of our highways, our roadways, and everything that we do are safer. And I do have to say that, and I'll finish with this, I was telling some of my colleagues earlier at lunch that this fall or later in the summer, I went to Garibaldi, spent the weekend with my family down there, and I decided to ride my bike from Garibaldi to Rockaway Beach. Now, some people would automatically say that I must have had a stroke to start on that project, but it was certainly an enjoyable ride, except for the fact that when you really get out there on the road and you see how narrow those shoulders are, and how when you've got freight traffic and everything else trying to share that same piece of real estate, how important it is for us to look at not any one of these and not go out and mark our territory as to what's more important or anything else, but to realize, just like we did in getting the transportation bill passed throughout the state, is we need to look at it all, and we need to support each other's projects, and we need to support what's because I challenge that what's good for Marion County is good for Columbia County, and what's good for Columbia County is going to be good for Hood River County, and we are all in this together. So we've already sent in the list, but nonetheless, I think that's where I need to stop. Thank you for your time. Appreciate that.
Commissioner, thank you for your commitment. I know that you have signed up to participate and be a county representative for the Public Transit Rulemaking Committee, so thank you for that too. Excellent. Okay. Commissioner, did you guys all, we just said, well, we have city here as well, but Commissioner. Okay. Good to see you. Okay. Commissioner Savas.
Thank you all. Honored to be here today. This is my first time at this. Region 1 Act is new in and of itself, and we're that little sleepy area in the north part of the state. Portland metro area. Yeah. And our act is made up of 31 members, so I thought I would share all 31 perspectives, but I changed my mind. And we've submitted, our act has submitted some comments, so forth to staff, so I'm sure that you all have those, so I won't really repeat a lot of that. We are, I think as a region, we're kind of grateful for the 2017 bill. I think that maybe some are very well satisfied, and we got halfway there as far as maybe some of the 3 bottlenecks. We got part of Rose Quarter. We don't have any clear direction yet as a 205, but a little bit more money to study that. And, but we got to really, because of the, be very careful, but how I say this, but because we have a lot of needs within some of the jurisdictions, like the city of Portland and the city of Beaverton and you know, cities in Clackamas County, there's a lot of local needs. And Commissioner Rogers, I'm the vice chair of the Regional 1 Act. Commissioner Rogers couldn't be here today. But Commissioner Rogers and I do say and believe that we really need to look at the system and feel that really ODOT, the Region 1 Act, should be looking at more system-wide type of issues versus local. Not that you don't focus on local, you need to do that as well, but I think that's the result of having more projects in need than we do have dollars. So that's just a reality we have to cope with. Oddly enough, locally, there seems to be a little bit of pushback from some of the folks that not really want to do the Rose Quarter, for example, that those monies maybe ought to be allocated elsewhere, or, so there's a lot, we'll be sorting that out, I guess, as a region and try to understand that better. A lot of uncertainty. In June, we heard out of the legislature that there would be tolling on I-205 and on I-5. And that didn't really come to fruition in the bill, but some people think it did in the sense of the value pricing. So there's uncertainty in our area as to what's going to come of that. I'm sitting on that committee. I'm going to have a heck of a good time. That's going to be a lot of fun. There it is. I know. I'm looking forward to that. Because it's everywhere we go. That's all we hear about. And, you know, we are going to study 8 different scenarios, and I think will help give people whatever they're thinking it may or may not be. I think they'll give something that they can relate to. But we'll see how that goes. And then we're also talking about a regional bond in our area to make up the difference of getting half of our projects funded, if you will. But in reality, trying to do that by November of 2018 is not likely, and you know, maybe it's November of 2020. Nonetheless, it's still out there. The need's out there. This morning, if I could just give you a small experience of what it was like I'll put my county hat on. We had our meeting, our normal business meeting for the county, and 3 of our commissioners were late. They got on 205 and they were traveling, took them 30 minutes to go 5 miles. That's approximately a mile a minute. That's a mile every 5 to 6 minutes. So they were delayed. That's not uncommon to have literally 205 completely backed up. And because of the Clackamas River, because of the Willamette River kind of bifurcating some of our cities and our county, sometimes it is the only way to get from point A to point B. So it's not just interstate, but it's actually a local connector for a lot of our purposes. So Region 1 is Hood River County, which is a small rural county. Clackamas County, which is half urban and half rural. And Washington County is Region 1 is only represented on the urban side of Washington County, and Multnomah County, which is largely urban. So our metro region has a joint policy advisory committee on transportation, and that is actually includes Clark County, but it does not include Hood River County. So we have a really interesting mix, and that's where the MPO, that's actually our MPO, if you will, is a JPAC. So nonetheless, all to say, it's quite complicated, and I think that what was submitted today kind of gets there. I think I heard discussion of highways. We have a lot of highways in our region, state highways that ODOT's responsible for. And in Clackamas County, we have probably more highways, state highways, probably than any county in that regard. And our rural highways, if you will, are beat to death. They are beat to death because people commute in and out of the urban, in and out of the urban area back and forth. And today we were at Estacada for a Chamber of Commerce meet, all the county commissioners, and it seemed like half the staff there, half the staff there in Estacada lived in the urban area, and yet more than half the population of Estacada goes to the urban area to go to work. So you've got people driving in to go to work in Estacada, in the rural area, and the other part going back. So all to say, our rural roads are really beat. From a maintenance standpoint, in the 2017 bill, we have a $17 million annual shortfall, and House Bill 2017 helped fill half that gap. So we're pleased that we got that. So there are some pluses with that. So I'm grateful for that. And as far as commerce, I want to echo a lot of things what I heard here about commerce and how important that is, whether it's the Rose Corridor, it's the interstates. That's really, really a huge factor for us. Anywhere we go, when we talk transportation anymore, we're talking housing, we're talking displacement, affordability, our homeless counts increasing. So we're losing a lot of employment, or our population is growing faster than we're growing jobs. So our need for transportation to retain companies, to grow our companies is tremendous. And the Sunrise Corridor is one of those projects, for example, that it's been on the books for 37 years. We're grateful we got phase 1 done, but we have a lot of development potential and a tremendous need because just our homeless count in Clackamas County grew 40% in the last 12 months. So that gives you a picture of what we're coping with. So I think I'm just going over my notes here. I think I will leave it at that. We have, of course, I will say this, we do have a rural versus urban kind of a situation in Clackamas County. Of the 4 counties in the act, is actually literally divided in half as far as population. But from a road standpoint, there's a tremendous amount of state highways that are more rural than they are urban. And again, that really creates a difficulty because the rural part is not well represented in the region, and the STIP allocations are the only means for the rural counties and cities and communities to see any money or any opportunity for any transportation funding. So having some discretion that way is great, and in the enhance, that's really important, but it really creates a very difficult situation for our rural communities because of the composition of the act is heavily urban. So they always want, and we advocate for as commissioners, try to get as much love to the rural areas as we can in these cases. But that's the politics of our region, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Chair Vianney, Commissioners, and Director Garrett, thank you for this opportunity for us to talk today. My name is Ken Woods. I'm a member of the Dallas City Council, and I'm also Chair of MWAC. And for the record, I am a city councilor, not a county commissioner. You got to watch those guys. They all sit together. I've got some notes here, and just remember I'm the messenger. So, yeah. You asked us to prioritize things. Well, our act has been around for a long time, over 20 years now. And I remember the conversations we had back then because we asked, well, why don't you put the word safety in these projects or requirements or descriptions? And they said, well, it's meant to be there. And I said, why don't you put the word in there then? So now the word safety is appearing a lot of places, and we're happy for that. So our priorities for the projects are primarily safety, fix-it, enhance non-highway and local government. We do want the OTC to continue to address the high accident corridors and locations on our highways and local roads. For the split, we chose at least 50% going towards safety projects, 30 fix-it, and 20 enhance. When we talked about the enhanced discretionary funds, we were didn't have all the information at the time, but we have several questions about what is the amount of the funds being considered? Will they be divided between regions? What is the process? Does it go through the acts or only to the OTC? Are these funds only for adding to fix-it projects, or could they be used for new standalone enhancement projects? Could they be used for previously modernized projects that only are partially funded? Or would they be used to supplement the House Bill 2017 projects? What specific programs should the commission target? Non-highway funding. We chose some numbers. 70% public transportation, which includes bus replacements and transit centers. 30% divide between the bicycle, pedestrian, and transportation option programs. We have some general comments we'd like to share with you. When the acts were first formed over 20 years ago, it took a while for our act to determine what is the it. And that was actually, somebody said that during the meeting. Why are we meeting? What is our mission? So after learning about everyone else's transportation problems in our tri-county area, which is Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties, it was determined that safety and congestion were our top two issues for the act. The acts were then given a funding level so we could prioritize projects in our area. We went through the OTIA program, some of the early Connect Oregon programs, and then our 4 acts in our regions would meet and prioritize projects in the regions for preparation to the statewide meetings. Now, when we're comparing or choosing projects, we have to choose between some expensive transportation projects to bus purchases, bicycle paths, curbs, sidewalks, and other various projects. So it's hard to compare these projects with each other. Regarding House Bill 2017, we feel the trend is starting to change, and we're a little concerned about that. Yes, we had an opportunity to comment, but not all of the legislative committee was there when they visited us, so they did not all hear our message. It appears that the legislature has taken it upon themselves to determine what enhanced projects are important for our areas and our acts. You know, we have city councilors, we got county commissioners, we have other lay people involved. I shouldn't say this, I've been on the Dallas City Council 35 years. I don't have a life. But yeah. So I kind of have an idea of what's important for my area. And I know the 17 members of the act, they all seem to know what's important for their areas. So we hope to get more involved in these project selections as they come about. The new public transportation funds will be mostly used for operations that still need to have state funding to help cover the 20% match for bus replacements. There needs to be a recognition by the OTC and legislature to fund the completion of projects. Several projects in the MWAC area are only partially completed or partially funded. For example, Oregon 22 and 51. When there's an accident, not if, but when there's an accident there, the highway is virtually shut down for 4 hours. You can't get out of Salem. You can't get into Salem because that's the only road going east and west. Another one perhaps you've heard of, maybe Newburgh-Dundee bypass. Is that new? Yeah, okay. These 2 projects have been on our list since when we were first chartered over 20 years ago. The other ones that are coming up that are partially funded, there's Aurora-Donald exit at I-5. At any time during the day, there's going to be baggage up onto I-5 waiting to get off. Highway 22 at Valley Junction, which is near Spirit Mountain Casino, hasn't been completed, it's partially funded. And then we're getting a new project thrown at us, and that's the 3rd bridge over the Willamette River in Salem. There's a need to increase the TGM funding level to meet increasing demand level. The TGM funding has been flat for this program for far too long, and the demand has gone up, but the funding has been pretty flat. That was mentioned in your scenario 1. Make leverage projects responsive to transit needs. The transit people in our act were telling us a lot of times when there's a construction project, they're not involved in the conversation and they have needs in that area too, so they'd like to be able to work with them together. These are the non-highway programs. So that's kind of what I have, short, brief, and to the point. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Derek DeGroot, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I'm from Klamath County Commissioner and Vice Chair of the South Central Oregon Commission, which represents Klamath and Lake counties. Commissioner Winters was supposed to be here today. He's our chair, but it's elk season, so you get me instead. I think that between Judge Thompson, Commissioner Lyken, and Commissioner Heimler, I could just say ditto and move on. But people worked real hard to tell me what to say, so I'll go ahead and go through this anyway. So, all right, thanks. I think it's interesting. I've heard a lot about seismic resiliency and Highway 97, and ironically, today we were doing our earthquake drills in Klamath County. And I think, I'm sure many of you were probably doing the same. Ours being done in a fairly new building in an otherwise historic downtown because our original building fell down in an earthquake. So we believe that Cascadia is going to happen, just when. And it's something that we always need to be prepared for. So seismic resiliency and in particular Highway 97 are critical to Klamath and all of Eastern Oregon, and I would say all of Oregon. As if an event happens, I think that we've seen disasters around the world right now where their infrastructure is exactly the key in how they're able to respond to their citizens and make sure their constituents are taken care of in an expedient manner. So as far as the questions that you guys had for us, as far as the allocation of funds, maintaining our roadways is key. So fix it is probably the number one priority of our act. That being said, it's maintaining and repairing roadways, including our low volume roads. We do understand, and that I actually know that farmer from Klamath County, that, and it's many of them that know that their number one struggle is some of the congestion in the Portland area, and so we're happy that's going to be addressed. But some of those low volume roads is how they get their product out of the fields. And so it's important to us not to forget to maintain those roads as well. Ensuring readiness for economic development. I think Commissioner Heimler touched on this quite a bit. Those immediate opportunity funds are crucial to our communities. We're all looking for different ways to build our economies and grow our communities. And when we finally get that chance at a project that's really going to make a difference to our community, having access in a very real, fast way to funds that would put roads or services to the area where they're going to make those investments is key sometimes to getting those projects over other counties. We're competing right now for a project with a county from another state, and part of that's going to be key in how, whether or not they come to Oregon or they go to Washington. And we want them in Oregon, and we want them in Klamath County. So it may be the difference if those IOF funds are available or not. Sustaining and expanding access to freight rail service was also important to the act. We just got a nice new highway connecting part of Lake and Klamath County on Bly Mountain Pass. We would like to limit the amount of trucks that are going over the top of that thing. So in Lake County, they have some rail freight access issues that they would like to see a little bit of help with. For safety, follows the same arts fundings as was in the 1821 step. And leveraging opportunities and giving us some flexibility to work with ODOT at the ACT level so that when there are opportunities to leverage the funds that we do have available, we can do that. An example would be the 140 Brett Way project in Klamath County. That's a project that we believe ODOT will be partnering with Klamath County on. And we would like to have some flexibility for ODOT to be able to make those decisions. So I think that's it for me.
Victor Hoffer, Chair of the Oregon Transportation Safety Committee. Chair Boehne and Commissioners, Director Garrett, I want to thank you for including safety in this discussion. Safety weaves throughout the agency, throughout ODOT. The Transportation Safety Action Plan was recently adopted by this commission. And this provides a multimodal plan, a guidance for highway safety. So I'm thanking you again for letting us be here. I want the commission to know that as of last week, fatalities in Oregon are down 20% from a year ago. That's about 80 people. Commissioner Boehne, that's 80 moms and dads, boys and girls, friends and family who have made it home safely, who are alive today to be hugged and loved by their family. We're working hard for highway safety. On behalf of all of the OTSC, we'd like to thank you for your support of highway safety. Thank you. To the point of the questions, they're easy for me because I don't need any money. We give it away at our commission, at our committee. But I'd like to say that how should the commission prioritize? Not much of a dog in that fight because throughout all of the areas, highway safety, traffic safety is involved. So that makes us happy at our committee. It's getting moms and dads home. What is the appropriate split? Don't care because safety is in each and fix it and safety is an enhanced. Safety is what we like to talk about. With regards to the enhanced highway discretionary funds, I want to throw a little plug in that safety be part of the project. If the project if we take the enhanced highway project and make it as a base of the project, or we can just make it as extra credit for throwing it in. Either way, make safety part of the project. With regards to non-highway, we're doing a great job. Jerry's made a great point over there about safe routes to school. You've already agreed to try to move that up from 500,000 to $1 million a year. That's going to really leverage the infrastructure and make a place for children to be safe. I'm not known for being brief, but because I get paid by the word usually. But today I just want to say thank you for having highway safety here. And I want to particularly thank Director Garrett and Administrator Tori Costello in the audience for their dedication and their hard work to safety and getting people home, particularly those moms and dads and our friends and family every day. Thank you, Commissioner Boehne.
Chair Boehne, members of the commission, my name is Mike Montero. I'm the chair of the Rogue Valley Act. We are the oldest act. My wife reminds me frequently, what are you doing? I've been the chair of the act since the beginning. So I don't know if that disqualifies or discredits my comments or not. You be the judge of that. First of all, I think I will echo everybody else's testimony that the Rogue Valley Act is grateful for the transportation package. In the Rogue Valley, our constituent group on our act, I suspect is as diverse as you'll get anywhere in the state. They range from our conservative members in Grants Pass to those that are a little more liberal in the city of Ashland. And so they have different perspectives on what we would define as a balanced transportation system. And taken in isolation, every one of them is correct. Whether you're talking about transit, bike ped, roadway, or freight, in isolation, they're all correct. House Bill 2017 went a long way to provide specific funding to meet some of those needs, and we're grateful for that. But we still recognize, and all of us should, the challenges before the state, and now the challenges more particularly before this commission, and that is, notwithstanding that bill, there's still not enough money to go around. And so when you asked us to prioritize, we had our typical, we had our meeting, we had our discussion, we took the input. I'll share that with you now. But you look for evidence to, other than just somebody's anecdotal comment, how do you know that's really how they think? So notwithstanding, we've got a long list of projects that are strategic to our area, and they're very important. But Region 3 performed what I think was an excellent service to our region, and I think to the whole state. And I'll give credit to Frank Reading and Art Anderson for that. They developed a strategic resiliency triage plan for the Rogue Valley. Under the contemplated Cascadia subduction, without the key strategic investments that found their way into House Bill 2017, the Rogue Valley could have been totally isolated for months. And so with that work, what happened was that in our area commission, all of those priorities that we all have got put in second place. Our first priority was those strategic investments into those bridges that would connect us to the north and those slide areas that would connect us to those lifeline routes in 97. That's evidence. That was our number one priority. The next thing that we heard from all of our commissioners was what you heard echoed in this very room a year ago, and that is it doesn't make any sense to not maintain the assets that the taxpayers paid for. Fix-it is a high, high priority. So we want you to hear that as well. The other thing that I want you to hear, and I'm going to give you an example of it, is that there are opportunities for all of us to work together, and we would look for ODOT and the OTC to be part of that. Whether it is the non-highway funds, whether it is some form of enhance, or as Victor mentioned, safety, there are needs out there. And I think what you see before you today that was constructed by your staff is a recognition that there are needs, but also a recognition that there ought to be opportunities to leverage funds to meet those needs. That's just the smartest thing that you can do. So when we look in our area about what our needs are, and we're going to say the same things you've heard over and over, number one, it's freight. And I won't steal Dina's thunder here, but at the end of the day, when you look at modes and ask yourself one single question, what mode affects most Oregonians? And it's freight. You can be in a rest home, you can be in a hospital. You are totally reliant on freight, so it's got to be number one. Okay, however, does that mean to the exclusion of all others? And the short answer is no, it doesn't mean that. And there ought to be opportunities sought and identified to bring together those disparate interests and needs in some kind of a commitment to seek funding. Now, I'll give you the example of what we have in the Rogue Valley. Some years ago, about 12, 14 years ago, this commission approved funding for the South Medford Interchange, about a $70 million project. And presently, traffic on Interstate 5 queues back onto the freeway, both north and south in the peak hour. We got ourselves a safety problem, big time. There is a project that's been identified, and it's not an ODOT project, it's a City of Medford project. So the City of Medford says, we've got a problem, but we've got the solution, but it's got a $50 million price tag. Well, guess what? City of Medford doesn't have it. The MPO doesn't have it, and you folks don't have it. So what do? So we start looking for partnerships, and so without going into all the details of what those partnerships are, the City of Medford is currently in the process, and we believe will be successful in assembling both private and public funds that come from multiple jurisdictions and multiple property owners into a leveraged funding project for which they will likely come to our area commission and say, help us with. So what are they talking about? Are they talking about, well, we'll bring 20% and, ODOT, please give us 80? No. From what we see presently, it looks like it may be as low as 30% of the project. So what we ask the commission to do is to make certain that they preserve financially the ability to enter into those strategic partnerships. Because, to go along with Victor's comment, one life lost is too high a price to pay. If the state can cure its queuing problem at the bargain price of $20–25 million, and they have a partnership with all the rest of the region that they put skin in the game, then the commission ought to reserve the right and the ability, the capability of doing that. So we just want you to, and our project is not the only one like that. There must be projects like that in needs and opportunities all over the state. So just make sure that you have sufficient flexibility in your funding to reach out and capture them when they happen. The last point that I want to make in our region, and as Art Anderson reminded me on the way up here, transportation projects are sometimes pipelines. So we got the message on the resiliency thing. The triage plan scared us all to death, and it should. So we started looking at alternative energy options, and we've talked to you about this before. Our regional landfill has a project in the works right now evaluating the potential of converting their excess methane gas into regional renewable gas. And we've made huge progress on that. And a partnership, talk about leverage and partnerships, we said, fine, if we get that in a pipeline and get it over the hill, how do we best deploy that for the benefit of our region? And so we have a, not formal yet, but a partnership with our utility provider, Avista, and with Rogue Valley Transit District, where they have high-pressure, high-speed fueling capabilities. And in this resiliency plan, that pipeline would be connected to Avista's pipe. It would be isolated off to where that gas would be used or made available exclusively to ODOT, Jackson County, the cities for emergency response. Now, we've got a ways to go, and we're likely to be back here before you sometime in the future saying, give us a hand or give us support. There are some exciting things happening, and all of that has come, frankly, from the leadership that's come out of our area commission. So as the other comments have been made, if these acts have been important in the past, it's just started. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. I'm Gary Melliman, Chair of the Southwest Area Commission on Transportation. And I'm the city manager in Brookings, so I'm not an elected official. I'm a city guy. I'm the one who tells the elected officials everything they need to know to make a decision. So first I'd like to go off the agenda and express a thank you to ODOT. As many of you have experienced fires over the last season, we had a fire that consumed 20% of the land area of Curry County. And ODOT was a good partner in the response to that fire. And I just want to thank publicly ODOT for their efforts in that response. So the SWACT consists of Curry, Coos, and Douglas counties. A few comments, and I'll be brief. We're happy to see the transportation bill. Our act believes that the focus should be on fix-it. I think they would likely find that scenario 2 best fits their thinking. I think they would find that earmarks diminish the engagement of the acts, and money enhances the engagement of the acts. And I have a number of ACT members who are worried about that they are concerned about what is the future role of the ACTs. And I hear good things today, that there's a way to have the ACTs continue to be meaningfully engaged, and I hope there's some work put into that. I did promise one of our members, from Southwest Oregon Regional Airport, to read one comment that she gave me about that. And that is that Southwest Regional Airport was surprised to discover that there will not be a competitive process for the next round of Connect Oregon funding, because the projects for 17-19 were already selected in HB 2017. And the Connect Oregon is the only transportation funding available for multimodal projects, including airports. So this was disappointing news. So I advised them I would read that comment to you today. So I think our ACT would agree to focus on Fix-It, to continue to engage the ACTs to the maximum possible, and I'll report back to them some good news that I heard today, that effort will be underway. Wanted to report to you one other kind of off-agenda thing, and that is that the City of Brookings voters approved a 4-cent fuel tax 3 years ago, and it sunsets in 2018. Our council just voted to put it back on the ballot for another reauthorization. That's generating $290,000 a year for local street maintenance and repair. Not a lot of money, but $290,000, surprising how far it doesn't go, particularly when you only have one paving contractor who also owns the rock pit and the batch plant. So, Commissioner, if you can find a solution to the bidding process, we'd be happy to hear about it. And that's really all I have.
You know, while I look at the list of projects that are in House Bill 2017, and I look at what has been identified for Connect Oregon, there isn't anything on that list that isn't meaningful and has value to the state of Oregon. But I share your challenge in terms of a process in which, for many smaller areas and such, that was the pool that we were able to use to be able to enhance investments across the state. So thank you for bringing that up. Please.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I'm Bob Krebs. I'm president of the Salem-Keizer Transit Board, and I'm here today as vice chair of the Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium, which is a big mouthful of words with a acronym of OMPOC. And OMPOC is a partnership of Oregon's 8 metropolitan planning organizations, and MPOs are a federally mandated for urban areas with populations over 50,000. And they're responsible for managing federal and state transportation funds and implementing federal and state transportation policies. And this group in OMPOC represents about 70% of Oregon's population, and members of the various MPOs meet quarterly to share ideas and so forth. We're sort of a clearinghouse for the MPOs working together. I might say that we appreciate being here as this is my first time here, and I think it's the first time here for the MPOs. We would like to build a stronger relationship with the Oregon Transportation Commission, because we do play an important role in transportation planning and funding. We'd recommend that in the future there'd be additional communication between the Oregon Transportation Commission and the metropolitan planning organizations, and that we would have more conversations on development of the TIP and other planning documents. Going back to the questions, OMPOC supports both the Fix-It and Enhance categories, but we find prioritizing is a little difficult, but I think what I've heard here today probably would, I can't speak for the group since we're a consortium, but I think they would be very happy with the comments that the other contributors have made here today. We also consider addressing congestion and safety to be of a very high priority, and bottlenecks are concerned to all because they have a statewide funding impact. I mean, they impact our movement of goods and people, and they also cost, when a truck is stuck in traffic, you're paying the driver and the motor's idling, and we all know the causes there. One thing that UMPOC members had some concerns about was that in the last STIP process, and it was discussed here earlier, how money was held back and used later. I'm paraphrasing because I'm trying to get the idea across. They would like to, if money is held back, that there would be more involvement with the ACTs, the regional solutions groups, and the Mpos in determining projects such as my colleague from Dallas mentioned, that we have some projects in Marion and Polk counties that could use a little more funding, and I'm sure that's true statewide. So those are my comments, and I'd like to change my hat just for a minute and talk a little bit about something that just came to my attention on the transit side, and that is that I noticed that there's no longer the $15 million in the STIP for the non-highway enhanced funds for bus replacements. And it may create a problem for transit districts around the state because even though we have House Bill 2017 that provides transit operating funds, most of the area transit agencies, and that goes from like Coos County all the way to Bend and Ontario, are struggling for enough funds to provide the services that their constituents need. And if we have to buy buses out of those funds, it's going to mean we cut back on the services we're providing. And an example, Salem Kaiser Transit runs a shuttle between Salem and Wilsonville, commuter shuttle, and we would like to replace our transit buses with commuter buses, because with one bus we can now add 15 extra seats. And what this does is, when we have transit service, we take cars off the road and put less pressure on the system. So we'd just like you to reconsider having some replacement bus money in the STIP. Thank you.
I appreciate that last comment about the bus replacement. I think that's an important detail. You being here today is our olive branch of really elevating that partnership with the Mpos. So
Well,
I really
and we
want to say
appreciate
thank
that.
you for, so it's a commitment of ours, and so we'll walk that together about what it looks like, but just want you to know that we're committed to making sure that we strengthen that relationship.
And I'm here as a transit guy because all the MPO staff is in their annual conference this week.
Oh, okay. Thank you for
That's
letting
why
us know
Mike
that.
Quillicy is not here. He's the chair.
Yes, okay. Well, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Alan, please.
Thank you, Chair Boehne, members of the commission. I'm Alan Pollock. I'm the chair of the Public Transit Advisory Committee Chair. I need to share that all transit providers in the state of Oregon are beyond ecstatic about the transportation package. The Oregonians who depend on public transit, their lives are going to significantly improve. So it's an exciting time for us. However, as part of that, we are looking how are we going to deploy this new money. And Bob mentioned the issue about the non-highway discretionary money for buses, and I'd like to expand on that a little bit, especially for the smaller agencies. You know, we have heard loud and clear that this new money is really to enhance existing service. And I think as we work with the advisory committees that we'll have to work with and the public as we gather input, I think they'll get using some of this money for enhanced service. But if it becomes a go-to source for all transit bus replacements, it's not going to see new service on the street. And people may want new buses, but they're also going to want the ability to get to places more often, quicker, and even on the days that they can't. And you've heard previously, you know, just to maintain the buses that ODOT holds title to, $4 million a year is needed through fiscal year 2030 just to keep useful life at 60%. I would argue, is that a good number to have your fleet at 60%? I don't know. The comments I have, it's tough. The other options that are available are important issues, but how do we address the ongoing fleet of existing service with this new money? And is that going to be an acceptable enhancement to the public? So I think some look at that maybe it should be under consideration, because I know I'm the general manager for Salem Kaiser Transit. This is going to allow us, because we have struggled with such a lack of service over the last 9 years. This will get us up to good basic service. It's not great service or good service, but it's good basic service that we can build off. And so, since Bob is here, he does a great job of always kind of keeping me in check, because I'm trying to look at the future, bus rapid transit and, express service and other opportunities. But what he keeps telling me is that's all important and we'll get there, but you got to have the basic level of service for people to live their lives before you can do all that extra stuff. And so that's where a lot of, especially the smaller agencies are at. They're just trying to get back to a service that people can really live their life, because right now people are scheduling their lives around the bus schedule, and we need to schedule the bus around their lives. Thank you.
Chair Boehne, thank you. Commissioners. I'm Jeff Munson. I'm the Executive Director for the agency Commute Options in Central Oregon, Bend area and beyond. I'm representing today the Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and also we'll be talking about transportation options, as Jerry mentioned. And I'm also a member of the Central Oregon Area Commission on Transportation, so pretty engaged with the Department of Transportation. And we appreciate the transportation package very much. As a side note, Madam Chair, you mentioned that the commissioners were on this side of the room. Over here we have OMPOC, PTAC, OBPAC, and OFAC. I practiced that several times and I still couldn't say it just right. But anyway, thank you very much for having us here. And so a few things about bicycling, walking, and transit as well that I'd like to talk about. There's approximately 40% of the urban state highway system that lacks good quality bikeways and pedestrian facilities right now. And so those are some of the things we want to have taken a look at. The needs outpace available funding. So additional funding is needed to address some of the disconnected and unsafe systems. And pertaining to the off-system bike ped programs, these paths are physically separated from the roadway and are the most safe. So you hear more and more about separated bikeways, trails, and so forth, which we don't like to divide them up between recreation and transportation, but they certainly meet the needs of all those user groups. So putting money there will help get people off the streets and in more protected areas for bicycling and walking, and support economic development along those lines as well. We talked about active transportation, and Jerry, thank you for mentioning me with transportation options. The slide that you had up there pretty much mirrors what I have down here in my notes too, so I want to thank staff for putting all that together. Active transportation leverages, adds biking and walking money to projects to complete the network more quickly and make it accessible for all. Of course, ADA, curb ramps, and other ADA issues have been mentioned already, but we think that's crucial. The Safe Routes to School education couples with transportation options. So the outreach of Safe Routes to School blends in with the infrastructure, and I think that's critical to talk about the education, the outreach to students, and how that, if there's good quality infrastructure, then we also need to talk about how to use that safely, especially among kids, but all age groups too. And we've shown that where there's schools that have good infrastructure coupled with that education program, then they have more students who are likely to bike and walk and do so safely. And so transportation options, those are providers like Commute Options, Point to Point, other groups that are represented in the room here. We're the professionals. We link transportation agencies to the users of the system. And we work with groups like veterans, people with disabilities, low-income minority groups, and the general public to put the word out about how to use the facilities safely and just promoting the use of those facilities. And we work with the business community a lot, with our agency, Commute Options, which we do some outreach work throughout the entire Region 4 area. We have 340 work sites that we talk to employers and employees about their carpool, vanpool, transit options, as well as biking and walking. So it's pretty considerable. All of the communities have those type of programs as well. So more money for transportation options can be used directly to leverage House Bill 2017. We work, again, in the community, students' needs, and pertaining to transit too. Jerry mentioned active transportation. We call that bicycling, walking, and transit because most transit users are walking or biking to the bus stops. And so that's a critical piece where active transportation, biking and walking, blends in with public transportation. In our area, we work a lot with Cascades East Transit to help them promote their group bus pass program and encourage more ridership and make sure that the bus stops are safe, convenient, protected from the weather. And so I guess I just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. The non-highway discretionary funds, that, as I mentioned, that pie chart is what the OBPAC, the Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, supports for all these programs. And I think access to schools and access to transit are the key elements to my piece of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Boehne, Commissioners, Director Garrett. I'm Dina Plattman, and I am the newly elected chair for the Oregon Freight Advisory Committee. And I also recognize I'm probably sitting between you all and happy hour, so I will make my comments brief. First of all, just to remind everybody, OFAC, we are a committee that represents a system within a system. We're a diverse group of folks that represent modes. That's marine, air, rail, trucking. We represent the shippers, we represent the port interests. So we bring to the table and into our committee work a vast amount of expertise in the area of freight. So we had a really lively committee meeting yesterday, and we posed it to our group. What would we like to convey to OTC and frankly to the ACTS, because this is a real opportunity for us to speak. And so the representing the committee, they wanted to let you know that we applaud the transportation bill, tremendous effort, and many of our committee members were active in helping make that happen with the legislature. We applaud the Connect Oregon becoming permanent. We understand that while we have it has been some dedicated projects, we look forward to working with ODOT as that Connect Oregon evolves. We also applaud the representation of freight within the ACTS. I understand that is something that was, I believe, at your request that we've included, and given the stories, frankly, you guys, I don't have to do a whole lot here because you were telling our story for us in terms of how important freight is. You know, Mike made mention that freight really does impact everybody's lives, and it's true just by listening to the challenges that you're having in Eastern Oregon with I-84 and truck parking and the closures. OFAC members had the opportunity to actually last month go out and meet with the Northeast and Southeast ACT, and we toured Port of Morrow and met with the City of Pendleton. We got to see some really exciting things and economic opportunities. And so making sure that while we are looking at our system and we are supporting, for example, I-5 and the West Coast Corridor and the ability to move, and so the projects that we're seeing in the Portland area are important, we also recognize that the first and last mile in local communities are very important. and we want to ensure that we're there to be able to provide assistance. So I think from our message, the primary message that we really wanted to convey at this point was that our committee is a resource. It's a resource to the OTC, it's a resource to the ACTS, and we are available and are actually, as we've are wrapping up an update of the Oregon Freight Plan, which is going to be we'll be moving that forward and through implementation. We also are going to be able to work with you on things like truck parking. There's some work that's going on with that. We're looking at, we've just completed a bottleneck study with ODOT. There's opportunities to look at how we implement and address those bottlenecks that we've identified and look at key solutions. Those are going to be things that we're going to be working with the local communities and through the ACTS. So we are available, and we will be putting together materials that we can then reach out individually with the ACTS and be able to support. So that's pretty much what I have to say. So thank you. Well, I love this part of the year because we get to hear about the details and the importance of the investments and the work that we do. And I think it's safe to say that we serve each of you as much as you're serving your communities. Our job is to make sure that we have a statewide system that meets the needs of all of Oregon. I just wanted to point out some themes that I heard, not necessarily the specific pieces, and then Jerry, you need to walk us home in terms of what, direction from the commission, but we did hear a lot about the infrastructure and the truck parking, so I think that's an important one. I know there's some work that's being done. A lot around transit, around engaging the ACTS. We heard a lot around flexibility of the funds and leveraging intermodal facilities and the importance there. We also heard around keeping decision-making local and making sure that we are, because you know your communities best. The readiness and the IOF, the immediate opportunity funds is important. A lot around economic development, a lot around rail and access to expanding rail opportunities. IOF again and leveraging again. Completing projects, I think, was another piece that we heard. Once we get committed, let's move forward with completing those projects. Match funds, I also picked up on that those can be difficult but needed. Increasing funding to the TGM program. The linkage of non-highway in with project scope so that we're not doing that in isolation. Seismic, and then seismic. We also, again, yes, and freight. The strategic partnerships, that piece for the P3 projects, that is critical as well. A lot around you want to remain committed and engaged in terms of being ACTS, and that role is important and desired. The bus replacement, making sure that we are keeping those dollars available, and the concern a bit about the bus funding needing to come out of the new funding and not out of the non-highway. Access in terms of to services, access to transit, improving bike ped facilities, increasing funding to transportation options, connecting transportation options, secure rural schools, sorry, there's my county hat, safe routes to school, the education outreach and facilities, and making sure that that's getting connected together. But most importantly, I think we heard a lot around, and for the conversation that my colleagues need to have, was let's preserve and maintain the system that we have today. And then overarching every single thing that we do, safety, and then safety. So we heard housing, a lot around economic development too, but just wanted to encapsulate that for us. We have the opportunity in front of us of new funding, but it's refreshing to hear that we are still remaining committed to making sure that we preserve the system that we have today. And so with that, Jerry or Paul or Travis, you need some direction from us in terms of what we'd like to see. And so colleagues, thoughts in terms of where it is we'd like to go? Please.
I did also hear a lot of congestion is an issue, expand rail, that we need to do economic development. we need to expand highways and all this other stuff. And to me, and yet everyone said, top priority is maintain the system. We can't, if we are growing, the state is growing at 1.5 to 2% a year, we can't even begin to mitigate congestion if we're not doing more to enhance our system. And I think it's just simple math. I know we need to maintain what we have, but the complaints and what stifles economic growth and even getting trucks from around the state through Portland, we can't address congestion and if we're not doing more on the enhancement side. And I'm just making a statement that if we just do the same, congestion is only going to get worse if we keep growing.
Well, maybe I would disagree a little bit in the sense that if we don't maintain what we've got, congestion's going to get worse too. Overall, I think what I heard, maybe trying to pull all this together, is I heard probably scenario 2 is kind of where I get to from after hearing all of these comments. I was, just a couple of general comments, I was really struck by the feeling, kind of as Commissioner Heimler said, we really are playing from the same, reading from the same playbook, and that's really refreshing. It's really refreshing to have you all recognize how important that additional funding has been for our future. And of course, you all, probably much more than us over here, are responsible for making that happen. And we're all really grateful to be in that position, even though, the theme I heard, of course, was it isn't enough. But boy, is it a big, big boost. And we should be thanking our legislators for that. The only other comment I had is that I did hear a lot about the importance of the acts, and that's certainly something I personally agree with, and I think everybody on the commission really understands how important the work that you all do in the acts and in the modal committees, how important that work is. I personally share some of the frustration about the earmarks, because it does tend to undercut some of the work of the acts. But I think you all have plenty to do to make this whole transportation system keep working better and better. Those earmarks will get taken care of, and they're important things to do. Those projects are important things to get done. And hopefully, working together, we'll get back to even more work for the acts in identifying and selecting, making recommendations on selection of projects. I guess then I just want to say, with that in mind, I think we owe all of you a big thanks for all the time that you put in to the transportation system work. Virtually all of you are doing this over and above your regular work. And I know it's because you're dedicated to the state and you understand the importance of transportation. But it's a big ask that we make of you to make that contribution, and you have responded remarkably.
Yeah, I would have to concur. Thank you guys for your time spent today and all the comments and support throughout this process. I would probably have to disagree slightly with Commissioner Lohman in regards to the scenario, because I really feel like scenario 1 is a strong testament to the direction the state overall has to go. We obviously know that maintaining the system is vital. However, for the changes that we're embarking on, just and our whole ecosystem as a whole related to, you know, the freight system and all the different modes of transportation and the different practices and behaviors that people are starting to embrace. The enhancement of the system is going to be very vital to the future and the future generations. I mean, if you just take into account just the automated vehicles concept, which I just learned earlier does encompass freight vehicles as well, and trucks and heavy trucks. There's going to have to be enhancements around that look at the system differently and innovatively. And furthermore, obviously, we know that there's a substantial need for our upgrades seismically with all of our assets as well. So those are going to be very vital and important, not only to just maintaining a safe and adequate systems where we can continue to save lives, but more importantly for the growth and economic prosperity of the state. But that was really all I had to say in regards to that. And again, thank you guys for coming to hang out, and looking forward to engaging in more dialogue after this.
Yeah, thanks to all of you for coming. I appreciate it. It's always nice to hear all the different sides of things, you know, living in Southern Oregon. And, you know, Mike, I think I was there when the act was formed, so, you know, you got to stay in charge and I got to go do other things. I don't know, one of us won. When I look at the scenarios, and I really appreciate staff building all this, but I go through with my green pen and highlighter and look at every one of you, almost every one of you, talking about the Fix-It program, almost every one of you talking about safety as a priority, and I appreciate that. And I think some of the things that we all do on a day-to-day basis, we forget about those because we want to do innovative and new things. I think our legislators, although I am not an earmark fan, they did us a favor by putting all that money into enhancing our programs. And with that, I think our staff then looked at where's the balance with Fix-It. And I see that with Scenario 2, and I think all of you are saying that because Scenario 2 gives us the ability to leverage some of those other enhanced dollars with Fix-It and safety projects, which all of you have asked for. So I, again, appreciate how you've looked at this and how you've given us direction from your acts. And I think it's very important that we keep the acts and the modal advisory groups with us. You guys know the local issues. We certainly don't. We might live them in certain areas, we might live one or two of them, but you are the ones on the ground to really bring us those local impact areas. So I appreciate that very much, and maybe that's just my small town upbringing, but I really do look to all of you to bring us those issues. So I appreciate that, and thanks very much.
So I'd like to offer a suggestion. Could you, well, let me ask this. Is there anyone here who is supportive of Scenario 3? Okay, so we've narrowed our focus, but I think we would like to have more detailed discussion about what the intricacies between 1 and 2, and so that we can understand a bit more about what it is that we would be moving forward with. I think also the conversation around the bus replacement and some of the other things that came up. I know that, Travis, you were taking copious notes, and we've caught all this as well in terms of on audio. But is that enough direction for you today that we would not be interested in going toward Scenario 3, but we would like further details on the other 2 for November?
Commissioner, yes, I think it is. You know, one of the things that we'll definitely do in November is put stuff a little bit in a tabular form so you start to see the totals and the numbers. Obviously, we had a discussion about IOF, and that was part of some of the other, I think that was in the other category.
It's in the local program.
Local program, sorry. So you'll see all of those numbers. We'll put those in sort of a tabular form, so you'll start to see sort of that bigger decisions, because you've made decisions along the way, and then you can sort of slice and dice at the very end, and then in December, hopefully bring something forward. So I think you've given us more than enough direction.
And we could have a hybrid between those 2 as well. So there's a lot of movement that can happen. I think it would.
Exactly. There's, you know, there's, 50, whatever the math is between scenario 1 and scenario 2 on the enhance, and that gives you opportunity to, yeah,
Okay.
you could slice and dice accordingly.
It's 100 million difference.
Okay. Please,
Could I just ask a question about the IOF? I may be off base here, but my impression is that that IOF has not really, in recent years, been oversubscribed for example, in the way that Connect Oregon has been. And I'm not trying to diminish that at all. I think IOF is really, really important, but I just want to make sure I understand what the facts are.
So it is a little counterintuitive, certainly during a recession, that you don't use IOF because development isn't happening. But we have seen in the past years an increase in the use of IOF funds. I think when Macklin spoke to you all in August about IOF, sort of the recognition, we've been having a conversation with Business Oregon that perhaps we need to be looking at the criteria a little bit different. Perhaps we need to be looking at the limits, those types of things. So perhaps thinking about how we might structure the IOF program a little bit differently. Ironically, I have an email from Chris that says, can you call me next week to talk about the IOF program? So I have no idea what it's about. He knows I'm here for the next 2 days, but we know that there's some work that we need to do there, but I think there's a very high interest in it. But I think with some tweaks, we will see better use of it.
And just from my perspective, there is a connection actually between Connect Oregon and IOF and the purposes of IOF. And once we're through this round of Connect Oregon, where a lot of it is earmarked, I think it can help with some of the very issues you're talking about in terms of stimulating or being ready for economic development.
Again, we also heard a lot around leveraging and flexibility of the funds, and so if we can come back with ways in which that can, we heard it both from our region managers as well as from the team here today, so I think that would be beneficial. Paul, please.
Just as Mr. Fixit here, just a reminder that in scenario 2, the amount that we're recommending there is the same amount that was assumed when House Bill 2017 was constructed. So if we do any amount less than that, there's probably a legislative conversation that needs to happen as well. I think to your last point on the safety, I did have that one slide suggesting that we have safety as part of that leverage conversation, which also would need to have some legislative conversation too, just around the intent to make sure we were aligned with those that were constructing House Bill 2017.
You're fixing safety problems.
Yeah, it's in line with what the statute says, but I just want to make sure we don't run afoul with our testimony and just the legislative intent of those funds.
We could also be enhancing the safety of the system too.
I was curious, Paul, if at that time we could have a little bit more of a explanation, more broad about where our hands are tied as it relates to fix-it, like what we can ultimately and explicitly cannot do with those types of funds. Like, are there any innovative ways that we could utilize fix-it funds?
I'm sure there is. I think what we'll be watching is the condition of the system. So what is our bridge condition? What is our pavement condition? What's our culvert condition? I think those are the assumptions that people will be watching as to what happens to those. If there's innovative ways that we can come up with ways to keep those those assets at that level, then yes. But I think that's the mark that we need to keep our eye on. The measurement, I think, at least in the short term, is going to be the amount of funding going towards those categories. But is there a way to apply innovation in a way to keep those levels where they are? Yeah.
Well, let me end by saying that the modal committees, the ACTs, we can't do our job without all of you. And as was mentioned, we are grateful for the investment of time. And I do look forward to working more closely with the Mpos. And we have a great list of opportunities in front of us, but it's also a heavy lift. So we are very much interested in the engagement of the ACTs and ways in which we can move forward on this, and very grateful for the commitment of time and interest in our state's transportation system. So unless there is anything else that you need of us, team, I think we're going to adjourn for the evening and be safe.